My fusion system. Fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapters 256 to 270. Chapter 256. We might miss out if we're late. Watson lowered his gaze to himself. He discovered that he had gotten slightly taller. His skin had turned baby white, and the color of his hair had changed. His hair used to be brown, but it had changed to a light gold color. He exuded a holy and noble aura, aided by the 6 white wings that extended from his back and the halo above his head. Host. Watson. Current form. Mythical creature angel form, can freely switch to human form. Effects. Can obtain eternal life and all the abilities of an angel, including absolute reflection and a large number of light elemental magic. Additional effects. Can be upgraded to platinum tier, ineffective against people who are already at platinum tier. The speed of light elemental magic, combat aura cultivation, and the damage to evil creatures are increased by 10 times. Watson stretched his right index finger and made a thin wind blade at the tip of his finger as he read the information. It slashed his arm and left a narrow wound on it. It emitted a sweet odor as silver-white blood oozed from it. Then, it gradually transformed into specks of starlight and disappeared when it came into contact with the air. The wound had healed rapidly. He was no longer a simple human but a high-tier life form with both human and angel forms. Angels are mythical creatures that lived in ancient times. These 6 wings on my back can let me fly 10 times faster than the combat aura wings, and the halo above my head is even more powerful. Watson shook the wings on his back and reached out to touch the halo above his head. Those were real angel wings. Every feather was made from flesh and blood, and there were many layers on them. It made them appear thick and heavy. They were not as easily destroyed as the combat aura wings. Furthermore, the halo above his head was not a decoration but a projection of the absolute reflection rule outside his body. The principle of absolute reflection was very simple. It could change the direction of the opponent's attack, and he could move it anywhere he wanted. The reason angels were so powerful was because of that rule. Whoosh! Watson fired a gold-tier fireball at himself. The massive fireball, which was as tall as a human, slammed into his face. The halo above his head flashed before it hit his body. 2 translucent mirrors with sharp edges appeared in front of him. The enormous fireball was consumed by one of the mirrors and ejected out of the other. Its target was the hall's main entrance. Boom! The flame exploded through the door, flew into the night, and vanished with a loud thud. That's right, absolute reflection is the 3rd diamond tier rule that I have mastered so far. It's easy to control even though it's not as strong as the explosion rule I developed. With this rule, even if I stand still and don't move, no one in this realm would be my match. Furthermore, I've also obtained immortality. Even if they could defeat me, they won't be able to kill me. Watson turned around to glance at his side. His family members, including Anna, had all evolved into angels. Not a single one of them had ascended to a demon. So, he mocked the statistic discreetly. They said that the probability of evolving into demons or angels is 50%. It looks like there's something wrong with that probability. Watson's family members had advanced to the platinum tier after evolving into angels. They beamed with happiness. How did I get so many wings? But they are so cute. Scarlet grabbed onto the snow-white wings and continued to tug at them. She looked like a child who had found her favorite toy. As for the others, they could feel an increase in their strength. They looked at Watson gratefully, especially Nindy and Vincent. As the eldest children in their family and the most talented ones in cultivation, the 2 of them had left home a long time ago. Despite their years of effort, they were only at the bronze tier. However, they had managed to advance to platinum tier after their few months' stay with Watson. Initially, the 2 of them were already at the peak of the gold tier. They were not far from the platinum tier. However, Watson's help had spared them from the effort to advance their levels. They could even break through to the diamond tier. They would not have been able to attain the platinum tier without Watson's assistance, let alone the diamond tier. Watson's family was excited, and the people in the banquet hall were even more excited. They watched helplessly as Watson's family, including Anna, evolved into higher-tier life forms. Most importantly, they had attained immortality. So, they ran outside and shouted, quickly, "Get me those people who can still make a wish today. I know of someone. Come with me." The vast banquet hall emptied in a second. It was only a few minutes before they heard thunderous footsteps from the outside. The people in the banquet hall had brought more people with them, and everyone looked excited. Some of them even had the spring of life water in their hands. "Young Master Watson, I've obtained water from the spring of life. Please help me make a potion. Although I haven't obtained any water from the spring of life, I've found someone who hasn't made a wish yet. He can get me water from the spring of life. Please wait a moment, young Master Watson." Watson waved his hand in the direction of the approaching crowd. "Do not be concerned. One at a time. Each of you will have a share." Then, he turned to look at Anna. "Miss Anna, it seems like we don't have enough food for the banquet." Everyone from Monty Town, Torch Town, Fairy Town, and even those from the manors at the mountain base rushed forward. That was 10 times the number of people they had expected to be there. That was why the food was not enough. "Yes, it's not enough, but don't worry, young Master Watson. I'll get someone to prepare more right away." Anna withdrew the halo above her head, the wings on her back, and agreed without hesitation. The freckles on her face were still there, but her entire person had become much younger. She had transformed from a woman in her 30s into a beautiful 20-something-year-old. Her body even surged with power. She needed to eat something. She did not even need to cultivate anything to advance. That was a feat that only Watson could accomplish. Anna walked to the banquet hall. She scaled her eagerness down a few notches as she made the preparations according to Watson's directions. At the same time, the entire Mount Creation was in a frenzy, and news of Watson merging with the blessings of the gods and devils spread like wildfire over the planet. Holding back the excitement in her heart, Anna went to the banquet hall to prepare according to Watson's instructions. At the same time, the entire Mount Creation stirred a huge uproar, and the news of Watson's fusion with the blessing of the gods and demons spread like a storm throughout the world. At the mayor's office, Torch Town. "Lubin, have you used up your wishes today?" Young Master Watson had fused a powerful tool that could allow one to advance to Platinum Tier and obtain immortality. One of the ingredients requires a wish from the Wish for the World ring. "If you still can make a wish, then come with me." Durant rushed into the office and grabbed Lubin, who was sitting in the office chair. He had seen how Watson fused a tool that could transform a person into an angel. Anna had evolved right in front of him. He was so jealous that his eyes had turned green with envy, and he had already used up his wishes for that day. Even though he did not get along with Lubin, he had no choice but to seek his help. "Are you serious, Durant? Even if I could make some wishes, why should I help you?" Lubin cast a sidelong glance at Durant. He had wanted to attend the banquet at Monty Town, but Durant had refused to let him do that. However, it looked like the man needed his help. "Don't waste your breath on me, Lubin. You have a chance to advance to the Platinum Tier, do you understand me? You and I have consumed the Sun and Moon gems, and we are now Gold Tier elites. However, we are still far from the Platinum Tier. Our family sent us to the border for the titles. Imagine how important we'd be after we've attained the Platinum Tier." Lubin's expression changed slightly, so Durant seized the opportunity to strike. He said, "There aren't many Platinum Tier warriors in the entire kingdom, and our families had none too. Everyone in the royal city and our family will be shocked if we become Platinum Tier elites. Don't hesitate." Young Master Watson said that there is a limited chance to do that. First come, first served. We might miss out if we're late. Chapter 257, Antonio's Breakthrough. At a manor on Mount Creation. "Master, I just received news that Monty Town is hosting a banquet for young Master Watson at Mount Creation's highest level. He has created a potion that allows people to evolve and get immortality. Other manors are preparing to head there after hearing about this. Should we go and take a look?" A guard exclaimed as he barged into a room where a manor owner was resting. "What did you say? Immortality?" The manor owner was hugging 2 young ladies and drinking wine. When he heard his subordinate's words, his eyes widened, and he stood up abruptly. "Yes, master. That was what Mayor Durant, Monty Town's mayor, had said. I heard that there's a limit to how many of those potions that young Master Watson could make. We won't have any if we're late to the party. Plus, we need to keep track of the number of wishes we had done on the ring. Have you made any yet today, master?" "I've used up all 3 of my wishes today. What should I do?" The manor owner looked troubled. At that moment, the guard smiled and revealed the Wish for the World ring on his finger. "It's all right, master. I haven't used mine today, so you can have it." "That's very thoughtful of you. There's no time to lose. Let's get to Monty Town now. The manor owner pushed the ladies away, tidied up his clothes, and walked out of the manor without another word. Similar things happened all over the mountain. A few farmers stood in a field at the foot of the mountain and chatted. Did you guys hear? Young Master Watson is currently fusing potions at a banquet in Monty Town. They say that the potion can raise a person's level to platinum tier. It looks like young Master Watson is no longer satisfied with just making platinum or diamond tier items. Another farmer said, "Your news is outdated. I heard that young Master Watson's potions could also evolve a person to a higher life form and give them immortality." What kind of life form? The other farmer asked curiously. The previous farmer replied, "I don't know. At the very least, it's comparable to young Master Watson's giant dragon and phoenix. Perhaps even stronger than those two. After all, young Master Watson is known as the reincarnation of a god. It's not strange for him to achieve that at all. Do you guys think that young Master Watson can turn us into gods?" That was a bold idea, and the entire farm fell silent. Then, someone said, "It's hard to say. If young Master Watson is the reincarnation of a god, then it might be possible for him to turn us into gods. After all, dragons and phoenixes don't have eternal life. Only gods can live forever." Mount Creation covered more than half of the border. Typically, it would take a few days for the news to spread. However, the magical passages that Watson had built everywhere on Mount Creation could transport one to anywhere at any time. The news about Watson creating an angel had spread throughout the mountain within a few hours. Didn't you hear? Young Master Watson's potion had successfully evolved someone into a platinum tier mythical creature, an angel. Of course, but I heard that young Master Watson created a large number of angels. That's incorrect. I heard that young Master Watson is a god now. He had successfully opened the door to the divine realm, so he summoned many angels. Praising young Master Watson is like praising the sun. The news not only spread quickly, but it also became more and more ridiculous. By the time it reached Watson's ears, the rumors had already turned into that. "Watson, I heard that you are the reincarnation of a god, that Mount Creation is your divine kingdom in the lower realms, and you want to turn everyone into angels. Is that true?" Sylvan had asked that question, and Antonio was beside him. The two of them stared at Watson in surprise. They had been studying the absolute explosion spell together. They wanted to understand the insights of diamond tier elites. Finally, they heard someone talking about Watson, and the information they got was so ridiculous that they had to ask Watson about it. "Master, Lord Sylvan, who told you that?" Watson was helping others to create the blessings of gods and demons. When he heard Sylvan's words, he coughed violently. He was speechless. A god's reincarnation? Divine kingdom? The rumor was too outrageous. However, it was true that he wanted to turn everyone into angels. "We thought so too, but can you explain what you're doing?" In a haze, Sylvan pointed in front of Watson. A person who had just received the blessing of the gods had 6 pure white wings on his back after he consumed it. As he sailed into the sky with an ecstatic expression on his face, a gleaming halo appeared above his head. Many similar 6-winged fellows were hovering in the sky, emitting a noble and holy radiance as they chatted with each other. There were 500 to 600 of them, and there was a long line in front of Watson, holding something that seemed to be the spring of life in their hands. They waited anxiously. Sylvan was the border count, so he was well informed. He recognized the entity floating above his head as an angel with only a single glimpse. Watson was mass-producing angels, even though the mighty race was already extinct since ancient times. No wonder other people thought of Watson as the reincarnation of a god. Who else could produce angels besides gods? Lord Sylvan, what I did was not as shocking as the rumors suggested. Miss Anna had a bottle of water from the spring of life, and I wanted to remove its side effects. Finally, I accidentally fused a potion that could grant people eternal life and upgrade them to platinum tier without any side effects. Watson responded modestly, but his words made Antonio and Sylvan look at each other as they gasped at the same time. There were no side effects from upgrading a person to platinum tier, and they were even made immortals, yet Watson still said that what he did was not outrageous. "Watson, regardless of how you did it, you created such a powerful potion without informing Sylvan and me. Isn't that a little inappropriate?" Antonio said solemnly as he stroked his non-existent beard. "I'm sorry, Master, I forgot to do that." Watson scratched his head awkwardly. He thought since everyone on Mount Creation would get the chance to fuse with the spring of life anyway, it did not matter who would do it first. However, he could not remain silent when Antonio said that. Watson activated one of his skills and made a wish to gain a vast pool of water from the spring of life and used his wish for the world ring. He combined it with Lilith's blood and bone marrow to form the blessings of the gods and demons potion. Then, he gave it to Antonio and Sylvan. Each of his 10 fingers had a wish for the world ring. He could make 30 wishes a day, and he had yet to make his first wish that day. Master, Lord Sylvan, this is the potion I mentioned. As compensation for failing to inform you about it, I will not ask you for the materials for those 2 potions. Antonio and Sylvan looked at the black and green beads in their hands as they felt a violent fluctuation enter their bodies. After they stared at the beads for a while, they stuffed them into their mouths. Boom! Before Sylvan had any reaction, a muffled sound came from Antonio's body. His fair skin began to crack, and rays of bright white light emitted from the fissure. At the same time, a terrifying aura that surpassed the platinum tier descended. At that moment, Antonio had broken the curse that plagued him and advanced to the diamond tier. Chapter 258, 2 Promises. The Forest of Eternity was in the southern part of the continent. Vigorous trees grew around one another, forming a massive tree that obscured the sun and sky. There was grass all over the ground beneath the gigantic tree. The grass and foliage were dew-stained, and colorful flowers and groups of butterflies and bees fluttered around. That was the deepest part of the Forest of Eternity, the sacred land of the Elven Kingdom. An ancient well stood in the center of the area. It was more than 10 meters wide and engraved with elvish characters that emitted a faint light. A female elf in a long dress made of leaves sat by the well, combing her golden hair. Her figure was slimmer than a human's, and 2 pairs of transparent butterfly wings were on her back. It was almost impossible to see her if one did not look closely. How many years has it been? This is the first time he had used the spell since I taught him that. I thought he would never use it. The elf combed her hair and turned to look at the moon well. The water in the spring of life was crystal clear. It even reflected her beautiful face. However, there was not much water in the well, and the level was barely half of the well. Vivian, I detected a change in the moon well just now. Did you do something? A deep male voice echoed from behind the female elf. A male elf in an emerald-colored robe and a crown had appeared. His snow-white hair was so long that it touched the ground. He looked angry. Your Majesty, I did not do anything. That female elf was Vivian. She blew into the well. The spring of life immediately rose to the well's opening. She turned her head and spoke in a calm voice. The crowned elf did not believe her. He rushed to the well and looked into it. The man was relieved when he found nothing wrong with the spring of life. Are you sure? Then why did the trees outside the forest wither? Vivian, as the guardian of the spring of life, it is your duty to protect everything here. Don't play any tricks, especially today. The Winter Nation's envoys have arrived. They want to buy some water from the spring of life. I have already promised to sell some to them. If anything goes wrong, don't blame me for being impolite. Your Majesty, isn't the spring of life part of our kingdom's fate? We shouldn't give it away to outsiders. Why is this time? Vivian was interrupted before she could finish her words. Shut up. Don't you know why I did that? The world had changed. Someone created a 7th magical element that does not belong to this world. According to the prophet, the person who created that element is now in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. The world will experience an unprecedented disaster, and our tribe is also part of that disaster. The Elven King raised his head to look at the distant sky. His expression seemed solemn. The Holy Dragon Kingdom is not necessarily the strongest among the 5 kingdoms on the continent, but it has always been the richest. The Winter Nation's envoys are not only here for the water from the spring of life, but they also brought news with them. The Dragonspine Snow Mountain was destroyed a few days ago. The Winter Nation thinks that it is a conspiracy by the Holy Dragon Kingdom, and they are hoping that we can contain them. They even sent troops to the Holy Dragon Kingdom to get more information. Your Majesty, are you sure that they are only trying to find out why the Dragonspine Snow Mountain collapsed and not taking the opportunity to occupy the Holy Dragon Kingdom? Vivian asked expressionlessly. Her words made the Elven King's face darken. It was a long time before he spoke. Vivian, don't think that I don't know what you're thinking. You're worried about that person, aren't you? The despicable thief who stole the water from the spring of life 400 years ago. Oh, now he has become the most famous mage in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. He's also known as the astrologer. I advise you to give up on him. Elves and humans can't be together. I had believed in the words of the Holy Dragon Kingdom's emperor 10 years ago, and that caused my beloved daughter, Avril's tragic death. The elven king gritted his teeth as he said that, his face brimming with anger. Our kingdom has suffered so much because of the Holy Dragon Kingdom. This time, it's their turn. The Dragonspine Snow Mountains collapse is a good opportunity to attack them. I will make their emperor, along with that person, pay the price. Landhar I, the Holy Dragon Kingdom's founding monarch, had been unstoppable about 400 years ago. He had founded the territory with the help of a young platinum-tier mage named Antonio. No one could kill the mage because he had drunk from the spring of life. He would be resurrected even if he died. The Holy Dragon Kingdom had resolved to mend the conflict more than 10 years ago by establishing diplomatic relations with the Elven Kingdom. The elf race's prodigies, Avril and Sylvan, visited the Holy Dragon Kingdom's capital as ambassadors to meet with Landhar III, who fell in love with Avril at first sight. Then, Landhar III ascended to the throne and proposed to Avril. At that time, most inhabitants in the Elven Kingdom had opposed the marriage. However, the Elven King had managed to suppress the public's opinion and even facilitated the marriage of his daughter to Landhar III. He thought that the two kingdoms could see peace for generations and would grow stronger together. No one would have thought it would end that way. The Elven King snapped back to his thoughts and snorted at Vivian. Look at you now. You were once the glorious guardian of the Moon Well, but you are now imprisoned here forever. Did the astrologer come to see you? He did not. He used you to get water from the spring of life and then abandoned you heartlessly. It's time for you to wake up. A lowly human should not have been able to fool a noble elf. That's all I have to say. You'd better take care of yourself. I don't want whatever had happened in the Forest of Eternity to happen again. Then, the Elven King turned around and left without looking back. Your Majesty, perhaps you're right. I'm not very clear-headed, but I have never regretted what I did. Vivian stared at the spring of life after the Elven King left. Antonio stole water from the spring of life for a promise. And it's because of that promise that the Elven Kingdom has managed to survive until now. Now, he's using a spell to ask me for water from the spring of life for another promise. It has been more than 200 years, and this is the first time he took the initiative to look for me. How could I refuse him? The Forest of Eternity was a lively scene, but the girl's sorrowful murmurs floated in the air. It did not fit in well with the environment there. At the same time, on Mount Creation, it looks like I have advanced to the diamond tier. Antonio raised his right hand and opened the 6 wings on his back. The feathers on each wing were as white as snow as they burned with blazing light. He looked excited as he continued to get younger. It had been so many years since he took the spring of life, and his strength had not improved. The water was a gift to him, but it was also a curse. Vivian, the moment Antonio advanced to diamond tier, the image of a woman flashed in his mind. He closed his eyes as he heard the sentence again. Antonio, I can give you water from the spring of life, but you have to promise me that you will always protect it in the Forest of Eternity. I will not let any harm befall the elves here. If you can't promise that, then I will kill myself along with the spring of life. Those words and the woman's shadow turned into a memory that flashed in his mind repeatedly. He had promised the woman 2 things. The first was that he would protect the Forest of Eternity if he were to drink from the spring of life. The second one had something to do with the woman. If he were to use the spell that the woman had taught him, then he would make his way to the woman immediately. He had thought that he would never fulfill that promise in his lifetime, and Watson had prompted him to make that decision. Chapter 259. Creating a New Spring of Life. Antonio looked at Watson. Watson's gentle face lit up with delight at his progress to the diamond tier. That warmed Antonio's heart, and he felt a sense of pride at the same time. His strength had been restricted for 400 years due to the spring of life's curse. He had tried many methods during those years, but he only managed to develop the time-stripping spell. Watson had managed to do what he could not. The young man had broken the curse. Antonio had spent his entire life serving people. He had lived with the late King Landhar I. Then, he had lived among thousands of people in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. His duty had always been to improve the lives of those in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. However, after meeting Watson, he felt as if he could finally let that weight go. What initially impressed him about Watson was his ability to learn everything in a single sitting, and he could even fuse it to get stronger. Later, he realized that Watson could fuse spells and construct incredible buildings, magical beasts, and even weapons and armor. There were hardly many platinum-tier items in the entire kingdom, but Black Moon Town had made almost 100,000 of them. The Dragon Knight army was the kingdom's most formidable army, and Watson had not only created a massive dragon, but he had also started to create angels. That was already a feat that surpassed any other human. Antonio had never acknowledged it, but he thought that Watson's influence had long exceeded the Holy Dragon Kingdom's wealth. He was not worried if he had Watson with him in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. He could relax and go to the Forest of Eternity to see the woman he had not seen in 400 years. However, he must first send Watson to the Royal Academy so that he could perform on a larger platform. The young man was still a little immature, he still needed training. Antonio made up his mind after looking into Watson's soft eyes. At that moment, Watson's accomplishments surpassed his significantly. He had no idea what kind of incredible feat he would perform in the future. He could already picture Watson approaching the royal city and raising a ruckus throughout the kingdom. While Antonio was moping, Sylvan, who was standing next to him, had completed his evolution. His eyes had turned scarlet, and 6 pitch-black bat-like wings extended from his back with black flares. 2 long demonic horns protruded from his brow, and a ball of flames burned in the center. As an elf, Sylvan's body had a natural aura, but his aura had changed into something evil and terrifying. He was the first to evolve into a demon since Watson created hundreds of blessings of the gods and demons. He was also the first person on the entire border to have both elf and demon bloodlines. Sylvan was neither a pure elf nor a pure demon. Instead, he was a combination of the two, a fallen elf. I can feel that my strength is 10 times stronger than before, and I'm only a little bit away from the diamond tier. Sylvan suppressed his excitement and restrained his body's demonic characteristics. He nodded and thanked Watson. You have fused an incredible potion. Do you have any more? Please give me another one. I'm willing to pay for it. He was 10 times stronger after only 1 potion. If he took a few more, would he not reach the peak of his life? I'm sorry, Lord Sylvan. I only have 1 for each person. It's useless even if you take more, Watson said apologetically. Watson did not wait to observe Sylvan's regret. He said, and since I've given you the blessing of the gods and demons, I can't get more water from the spring of life water, so I can't use it as the raw material anymore. As he spoke, he twisted the wish for the world ring on his finger and read the details of the ritual in his head. However, all he could hear was the failed wish warning. The lady named Vivian did not respond to him. It was pointless no matter how hard he tried. He understood that he would not be able to get water from the spring of life indefinitely. He did not expect it would vanish so soon after only hundreds of individuals exalted to angels. He was unsure if it were because of Vivian's frugality or the lack of water in the spring of life. He reasoned that he would have to wait until he promoted tens of thousands of people in town before he would turn it off. Watson, I believe you've already discovered that a mysterious energy protects the spring of life. You can't get it by making a wish. You must first obtain permission from Spring of Life's guardian. However, the Spring of Life water is not unlimited, and you've used up about half of it. Don't worry, the water level will recover, and you'll be able to continue with your process, Antonio said as he descended from the skies. Specks of light would drift from under his feet with each step he took. He looked extremely divine. He had remained in the platinum tier for 400 years, and he had accumulated his progress for that long. That was why he was not only a simple diamond tier elite when he broke through to that level. Other than the absolute reflection that he had mastered after becoming an angel, the absolute explosion from his research over the past few days had also developed. It was called time suspension. He could stop the entire mount creation for a few seconds if he wanted to, which was akin to suspending more than half of the time at the border. He could stop it for an entire day if the scope were reduced to a town like Monty Town. The strength of a diamond tier elite was judged by the number of rules he could master. At that moment, Antonio had learned 3 rules, each of which was extremely powerful. Antonio, who had progressed to the diamond tier, drew the attention of everyone in the hall, including those in the sky who had already consumed the blessings of the gods and demons and transformed into angels. They could not help but admire Antonio. Some of them even looked dissatisfied. The majority of the folks were lining up to receive Watson's blessings of the gods and demons. They had not had the opportunity to utilize their wish for the world ring to get water from the spring of life. When they heard Watson and Antonio's comments, they realized that the water from the spring of life was temporarily gone. Their wish to become an angel could no longer be fulfilled. "Master, you said that it would take a while before we can get more water from the spring of life. How long do we need to wait?" Watson asked his master. He could sense the gloominess in the hall. The spring of life is the Elven Kingdom's treasure. It would probably take a year to restore half of the water in the well. A year? That's too slow. Watson frowned when he heard Antonio's words. He assumed that the spring of life had a lot of water and would be replenished once a month rather than every day. He had no idea that the spring of life was even more limited than he had imagined. Antonio's estimation of 1 year must have referred to the time in the outer world, which would mean 10 years on Mount Creation. They could only create a few hundred angels or demons in 10 years. They would have to pay a price of at least 1,000 or 10,000 years if they wanted all Mount Creation's occupants to live forever. However, everyone would have died by then. "No, I can't wait for that long. I only need some water from the spring of life to create the blessings of the gods and demons. I have everything else." They say that the spring of life originated from the world tree. "If the Elven Kingdom can't let go of their world tree, then I'll just create one," Watson muttered. He raised his right hand and activated the fusion system toward Mount Creation. All eyes were on him, especially Antonio's shocked stare. Whoosh! Countless trees ascended into the sky and fused together in midair in an instant. Watson's previously fused platinum tier shadow of the world tree, his diamond tier staff, other platinum and diamond tier objects, and other ordinary trees fused in midair to produce a massive green-colored light that blocked the sky. Everyone in the hall was taken aback by what they saw. Antonio's promotion to diamond tier was already enough to shock them, but Watson's actions were even more shocking. Chapter 260. Lofaz's reappearance. The shadows of the trees in the sky converged in midair and turned into a green torrent that engulfed the entire mountain. Whether it was the banquet hall or the people from other parts of the mountain, they raised their heads at that exact moment. A giant tree that looked like it could support the entire world had appeared in the sky. It had transformed into a green mountain peak, and with the trees on top, the two resembled a gigantic hourglass from a distance. Isn't young Master Watson creating a potion that can grant people eternal life? How did he make such a big tree? A farmer on Mount Creation was dazed as he gazed up toward the sky. Without even realizing it, the hoe in his hand had dropped to the ground in astonishment. "That's the biggest tree I've ever seen in my life. If that tree falls, I believe the entire world will crumble. I wonder what young Master Watson has done now. Young Master Watson can come up with some new tricks now and then. We could have gone to Black Moon Town to have a closer look if the old master had not asked us to wash the clothes at home." A few maids in a manor were looking up at the sky and talking to each other. Their eyes were filled with admiration for the massive tree above their heads, as well as disappointment at not being able to get a better look. In front of the banquet hall. "Watson, you are not going to create a world tree, are you? The world tree is a mysterious thing that was born at the beginning of time. Only the Elven Kingdom owns one in the entire continent. It is not something that can be made simply because you want to." Sylvan stared at the lush woods above him after retracting his demon form. He appeared to be concerned. If the massive tree could not support its weight and collapse, it would crush many things in the world. "Lord Sylvan, don't worry. I've already created one." Watson placed his hands on his hips and looked at the sky with a satisfied expression. Starlight Tier Special Item. World Tree. Effects. The Forest of Eternity. All plants within the area covered by the World Tree will be replaced by its branches. As long as the World Tree is not destroyed, it will grow alternately and endlessly. Natural transformation. The World Tree branches can be turned into any crop where its effects will be increased by 100%. Ancient War Tree Summon. The World Tree branches can form the strongest weapon of the ancient tree spirit species, the Ancient War Tree, with the combat strength of a Diamond Tier Elite. Additional ability. Spring of Life. Since the World Tree has absorbed too much essence of life, it will overflow and form a spring. You can gain eternal life if you drink from the spring, but your strength will be fixed at that point forever. It is no surprise that the world tree that provides for the Elven Kingdom is known as the Forest of Eternity. It is the tree's most powerful ability. Watson snapped his fingers as he reached his hand toward the newly fused world tree. Clack! Immediately, a few branches of the world tree fell from above his head and landed on the platinum-tier rocky ground outside the banquet hall. They plunged deep into the platinum-tier ore, and a few trees grew right in front of him, each containing a sun and moon jewel. Those trees resembled the shadow of the world tree that he had previously created, but their effects were more powerful. Every gem shone brighter than it had before. Then he snapped his fingers again, and several fruit trees fused together. The gleaming sun and moon gemstones had also fused to form a massive gold and silver eye, and the size of the fruit tree grew as well. The roots intertwined to form 8 huge tree legs, and hundreds of thick vines sprouted from the top of the tree. They twisted together to form a massive fist spanning dozens of meters and then spread apart, transforming into verdant whips. The fused fruit tree towered hundreds of meters above the ground and emitted a terrible power. Its bark reflected diamond light, indicating that it possessed extraordinarily strong physical and magical resistance. That was another talent of the world tree, the ancient war tree summon. The entire Monty town had trembled when the ancient war tree appeared. A few fissures formed on the platinum-tier ore walls and ground. The people there could not find their balance, and their expressions were filled with terror. Fortunately, Watson only managed to maintain the ancient war tree for a moment before it turned back into an ordinary tree. Watson, I take back what I said. I didn't expect you to create a world tree. Sylvan swallowed his saliva as he gazed at the massive tree that could not be seen from the top of his head. He was familiar with the world tree because he was born in the Elven Kingdom. He was aware that the ancient war tree summon was one of the world tree's talents. However, the ancient war tree summoned by the Elven Kingdom was merely a platinum tier 1. Watson's world tree appeared to be smaller and could only span more than half of the border. It could not be compared to the Forest of Eternity, which could provide for an entire kingdom. However, Sylvan thought Watson's world tree was superior. My disciple had created the Mount Creation. What's so strange about creating a world tree? Antonio's voice could be heard from the side. Sylvan noticed Antonio's facial muscles twitched as he spoke. He pursed his lips and thought to himself, it would be more convincing if Antonio's facial muscles did not twitch from shock. All right, everyone, we no longer need to beg the elves for water from the spring of life. We can now get it ourselves. Where was the line just now? Let's continue with the blessings of the gods and demons. I am ready to distribute to another 10,000 persons. From now on, we can give the blessings of the gods and demons to 10,000 people each day. Then, in about 100 days, we can try to grant everyone an immortal life. Watson stomped his feet lightly. The ground outside the banquet hall immediately cracked. The fissure was about 100 meters long and dozens of meters wide. Emerald green liquid gushed out of the cracks. It sparkled with starlight. It was water from the spring of life. It was a bit inappropriate to call it a spring because the crack was hundreds of meters long. It should be called a lake. If the elves were there, they would be shocked into speechlessness by the scene in front of them. Their spring of life was just a well, far inferior to the lake in front of them. After all, they did not have Watson to fuse all the platinum and diamond tier items on the entire Mount Creation. Those items were mainly the shadow of the world tree and the diamond tier world tree staff. Watson had created them in the past 2 months to decorate Mount Creation. There were tens of thousands of them, despite the fact that they were not as numerous as the wish for the world rings. One could only imagine the power when those items were fused collectively. Young Master Watson, you are too generous. Praise young Master Watson. Everyone outside the banquet hall looked pleased when they heard Watson's words and thanked him repeatedly. Their voices even reached the clouds. Only Anna and Ron, who were in charge of organizing the banquet, exchanged bitter smiles. That banquet was destined to be postponed indefinitely due to Watson's actions at that moment. Time passed quickly on Mount Creation. Soon, more than 3 months had passed, and on that day, a group of guests arrived at Mount Creation. Captain Loftus, is the so-called Mount Creation really as magical as you said? Gold tier fruits everywhere, and all weapons are platinum tier? A few guards trailed behind Loftus as they walked at the foot of Mount Creation. They looked around, and one of them inquired suspiciously. Another guard said, "Whether it's true or not, just merging more than half of the border into a divine mountain floating in the sky is not something that an ordinary person can do. I heard that there are high-quality weapons on that mountain, and also the gods and their servants. It is not as exaggerated as you claim. The so-called god is merely a young man who has learned a rare power, and those slaves are gold-tier elites." Loftus interrupted his subordinates. Watson had told him to return to Vermilion Town to think about his offer. He had been thinking about it for a week, and he had also sent a pigeon messenger to Adele. However, he had received no reply from her. So, he had no choice but to take some of his men to the mountain. He planned to prevent Vermilion Town from becoming a subsidiary of Mount Creation before Adele returned. Instead, he wished to strike a deal to purchase weapons and medical herbs. That way, when Adele returned, she would not think that he had acted on his own, and he could bring some benefits to Vermilion Town. He smiled as he thought about that. Suddenly, the guard beside him cried out in surprise. "Look at the sky. What is that? I think I see a god." Something plopped as he cried out in surprise. Someone appeared to be kneeling on the ground. A god? Loftus snapped back to his senses with some dissatisfaction. Did he not just explain that there was no god on Mount Creation? Everything there was made by a man, but someone had knelt for that. Those underlings who had not seen the world could truly make a scene. Loftus followed suit and glanced up into the sky, thinking about how he could give those people a lesson. It did not matter if he did not look. When he saw it, his jaw dropped as he knelt with a plop as well. A tree of unknown size stood in the sky, its emerald green branches and leaves even blocked the sky. However, Mount Creation did not appear dark because those leaves emitted a bright light of their own, illuminating the earth below it. However, that was not the main point. There were people with 6 wings and halos above their heads. All of them had a holy and radiant glow. They exuded a powerful aura too. Even the most unskilled person could tell that the winged creatures belonged to a legendary race, angels. "Captain Loftus, didn't you say that this is not a place where the gods live, and they have no servants here? How do you explain that?" A guard who was kneeling on the ground had asked weakly. He knelt because he was afraid, and the angels above his head were platinum-tier elites. The pressure they emitted was too intense. He was only a bronze-tier warrior. "How would I know?" Loftus groaned in his heart. He also felt that it was strange. When he left 10 days ago, the people there were only gold-tier elites. How did they get so many angels in only a few days? What was that giant tree above his head? Chapter 260. Loftus's reappearance. The shadows of the trees in the sky converged in midair and turned into a green torrent that engulfed the entire mountain. Whether it was the banquet hall or the people from other parts of the mountain, they raised their heads at that exact moment. A giant tree that looked like it could support the entire world had appeared in the sky. It had transformed into a green mountain peak, and with the trees on top, the two resembled a gigantic hourglass from a distance. Isn't young Master Watson creating a potion that can grant people eternal life? How did he make such a big tree? A farmer on Mount Creation was dazed as he gazed up toward the sky. Without even realizing it, the hoe in his hand had dropped to the ground in astonishment. "That's the biggest tree I've ever seen in my life. If that tree falls, I believe the entire world will crumble. I wonder what young Master Watson has done now. Young Master Watson can come up with some new tricks now and then. We could have gone to Black Moon Town to have a closer look if the old master had not asked us to wash the clothes at home." A few maids in a manner were looking up at the sky and talking to each other. Their eyes were filled with admiration for the massive tree above their heads, as well as disappointment at not being able to get a better look. In front of the banquet hall. "Watson, you are not going to create a world tree, are you? The world tree is a mysterious thing that was born at the beginning of time. Only the Elven Kingdom owns one in the entire continent. It is not something that can be made simply because you want to." Sylvan stared at the lush woods above him after retracting his demon form. He appeared to be concerned. If the massive tree could not support its weight and collapse, it would crush many things in the world. "Lord Sylvan, don't worry. I've already created one." Watson placed his hands on his hips and looked at the sky with a satisfied expression. Starlight Tier Special Item. World Tree. Effects. The Forest of Eternity. All plants within the area covered by the World Tree will be replaced by its branches. As long as the World Tree is not destroyed, it will grow alternately and endlessly. Natural transformation. The World Tree branches can be turned into any crop where its effects will be increased by 100%. Ancient War Tree Summon. The World Tree branches can form the strongest weapon of the ancient tree spirit species, the Ancient War Tree, with the combat strength of a Diamond Tier elite. Additional ability. Spring of Life. Since the World Tree has absorbed too much essence of life, it will overflow and form a spring. You can gain eternal life if you drink from the spring, but your strength will be fixed at that point forever. It is no surprise that the World Tree that provides for the Elven Kingdom is known as the Forest of Eternity. It is the tree's most powerful ability. Watson snapped his fingers as he reached his hand toward the newly fused World Tree. Clack! Immediately, a few branches of the World Tree fell from above his head and landed on the Platinum Tier rocky ground outside the banquet hall. They plunged deep into the Platinum Tier ore, and a few trees grew right in front of him, each containing a sun and moon jewel. Those trees resembled the shadow of the World Tree that he had previously created, but their effects were more powerful. Every gem shone brighter than it had before. Then he snapped his fingers again, and several fruit trees fused together. The gleaming sun and moon gemstones had also fused to form a massive gold and silver eye, and the size of the fruit tree grew as well. The roots intertwined to form 8 huge tree legs, and hundreds of thick vines sprouted from the top of the tree. They twisted together to form a massive fist spanning dozens of meters and then spread apart, transforming into verdant whips. The fused fruit tree towered hundreds of meters above the ground and emitted a terrible power. Its bark reflected diamond light, indicating that it possessed extraordinarily strong physical and magical resistance. That was another talent of the World Tree, the Ancient War Tree Summon. The entire Monty town had trembled when the Ancient War Tree appeared. A few fissures formed on the Platinum Tier ore walls and ground. The people there could not find their balance, and their expressions were filled with terror. Fortunately, Watson only managed to maintain the Ancient War Tree for a moment before it turned back into an ordinary tree. Watson, I take back what I said. I didn't expect you to create a World Tree. Sylvan swallowed his saliva as he gazed at the massive tree that could not be seen from the top of his head. He was familiar with the World Tree because he was born in the Elven Kingdom. He was aware that the Ancient War Tree Summon was one of the World Tree's talents. However, the Ancient War Tree summoned by the Elven Kingdom was merely a Platinum Tier 1. Watson's World Tree appeared to be smaller and could only span more than half of the border. It could not be compared to the Forest of Eternity, which could provide for an entire kingdom. However, Sylvan thought Watson's World Tree was superior. My disciple had created the Mount Creation. What's so strange about creating a World Tree? Antonio's voice could be heard from the side. Sylvan noticed Antonio's facial muscles twitched as he spoke. He pursed his lips and thought to himself, it would be more convincing if Antonio's facial muscles did not twitch from shock. All right, everyone. We no longer need to beg the elves for water from the spring of life. We can now get it ourselves. Where was the line just now? Let's continue with the blessings of the gods and demons. I am ready to distribute to another 10,000 persons. From now on, we can give the blessings of the gods and demons to 10,000 people each day. Then, in about 100 days, we can try to grant everyone an immortal life. Watson stomped his feet lightly. The ground outside the banquet hall immediately cracked. The fissure was about 100 meters long and dozens of meters wide. Emerald green liquid gushed out of the cracks. It sparkled with starlight. It was water from the spring of life. It was a bit inappropriate to call it a spring because the crack was hundreds of meters long. It should be called a lake. If the elves were there, they would be shocked into speechlessness by the scene in front of them. Their spring of life was just a well, far inferior to the lake in front of them. After all, they did not have Watson to fuse all the Platinum and Diamond Tier items on the entire Mount Creation. Those items were mainly the shadow of the World Tree and the Diamond Tier World Tree Staff. Watson had created them in the past 2 months to decorate Mount Creation. There were tens of thousands of them, despite the fact that they were not as numerous as the wish for the world rings. One could only imagine the power when those items were fused collectively. Young Master Watson, you are too generous. Praise young Master Watson. Everyone outside the banquet hall looked pleased when they heard Watson's words and thanked him repeatedly. Their voices even reached the clouds. Only Anna and Ron, who were in charge of organizing the banquet, exchanged bitter smiles. That banquet was destined to be postponed indefinitely due to Watson's actions at that moment. Time passed quickly on Mount Creation. Soon, more than 3 months had passed, and on that day, a group of guests arrived at Mount Creation. Captain Loftus, is the so-called Mount Creation really as magical as you said? Gold tier fruits everywhere, and all weapons are platinum tier? A few guards trailed behind Loftus as they walked at the foot of Mount Creation. They looked around, and one of them inquired suspiciously. Another guard said, "Whether it's true or not, just merging more than half of the border into a divine mountain floating in the sky is not something that an ordinary person can do. I heard that there are high-quality weapons on that mountain, and also the gods and their servants. It is not as exaggerated as you claim. The so-called god is merely a young man who has learned a rare power, and those slaves are gold-tier elites." Loftus interrupted his subordinates. Watson had told him to return to Vermilion Town to think about his offer. He had been thinking about it for a week, and he had also sent a pigeon messenger to Adele. However, he had received no reply from her. So, he had no choice but to take some of his men to the mountain. He planned to prevent Vermilion Town from becoming a subsidiary of Mount Creation before Adele returned. Instead, he wished to strike a deal to purchase weapons and medical herbs. That way, when Adele returned, she would not think that he had acted on his own, and he could bring some benefits to Vermilion Town. He smiled as he thought about that. Suddenly, the guard beside him cried out in surprise. "Look at the sky, what is that? I think I see a god." Something plopped as he cried out in surprise. Someone appeared to be kneeling on the ground. A god? Loftus snapped back to his senses with some dissatisfaction. Did he not just explain that there was no god on Mount Creation? Everything there was made by a man, but someone had knelt for that. Those underlings who had not seen the world could truly make a scene. Loftus followed suit and glanced up into the sky, thinking about how he could give those people a lesson. It did not matter if he did not look. When he saw it, his jaw dropped as he knelt with a plop as well. A tree of unknown size stood in the sky, its emerald green branches and leaves even blocked the sky. However, Mount Creation did not appear dark because those leaves emitted a bright light of their own, illuminating the earth below it. However, that was not the main point. There were people with 6 wings and halos above their heads. All of them had a holy and radiant glow. They exuded a powerful aura too. Even the most unskilled person could tell that the winged creatures belonged to a legendary race, angels. "Captain Loftus, didn't you say that this is not a place where the gods live, and they have no servants here? How do you explain that?" A guard who was kneeling on the ground had asked weakly. He knelt because he was afraid, and the angels above his head were platinum-tier elites. The pressure they emitted was too intense. He was only a bronze-tier warrior. "How would I know?" Loftus groaned in his heart. He also felt that it was strange. When he left 10 days ago, the people there were only gold-tier elites. How did they get so many angels in only a few days? What was that giant tree above his head? Chapter 261. Join Mount Creation. "Captain Loftus, I told you to go back to Vermilion Town and think about my offer, and it seems that you've thought about it for a long time." Watson poured a cup of jade-colored tea for Loftus while they were in Black Moon Castle on Mount Creation's summit. He spoke with a playful expression. The Black Moon Knights guarding the top of the World Tree discovered Loftus and the others as soon as they entered Mount Creation. The Black Moon Knights led them to the summit after questioning why they were there. Loftus's last visit had been 10 days ago, and more than 3 months had elapsed on the mountain. Watson had used the spring of life water from the World Tree that he had fused. He had transformed more than 1 million people on the mountain into angels or demons, granting eternal life upon them. As a price, most of the water from the spring of life had been consumed. However, Watson did not care about it. Instead, he decided to recruit more Black Moon Knights. There had been less than 100 Black Moon Knights in charge of guarding Black Moon Town. However, Mount Creation was home to more than 1 million people. A few dozen people would not be enough to protect it, so Watson teamed up with the mayors of various towns, including Sylvan. He declared his plan to grow the Black Moon Iron Knights by recruiting members from each town. Everyone agreed with his suggestion. After all, they could not go on without Watson. After Black Moon Knights had grown to 100,000 members, they would form legions of 10,000 members. They would have 10 legions. The original Black Moon Knights could command those legions, and their vice-commanders could be chosen from people from various towns or the lesser manors. Elvira, a genius from Torch Town, was made the vice-commander of the First Legion. Her excellent fire elemental swordsmanship was enough to destroy a city, and that had earned her the nickname Red Angel. Monty Town's Anna and Ron had been promoted to vice-commanders of a Black Moon Knights Legion. They were gold tier veterans, and they had a unique advantage over others after entering the platinum tier. Many people had performed extraordinarily well when they rose to the platinum tier in a single step, no matter if they were transformed into an angel or a demon, including those who progressed from bronze to iron tier. Watson was not stingy when it came to those people. They were all outfitted with platinum tier weaponry and armor. During the monthly training, there was no limit to the number of medicinal plants that they could consume. They also had the wise counsel of Antonio and Sylvan, the two elites. One could argue that only Mount Creation had such treatment in the entire kingdom. Loftus was sitting on a soft, comfortable chair at the time. He was dumbfounded as he peered at the tea that Watson had given him. Watson's tea was, without a doubt, of the highest quality. He could not help but swallow his saliva due to the aroma it emanated. The speed of his circulation had risen tenfold simply by smelling the combat aura that coursed in his veins. "Young Master Watson, I am here for the discussion that we did not finish the last time. I've decided to purchase weapons, armor, and medical herbs produced by Creation Mountain on behalf of Vermilion Town." Loftus took a tentative sip from his teacup as he spoke. The smell of the tea cascaded down his throat and oozed from every pore on his limbs. He could not help but moan in comfort. He had eaten a fruit from a roadside tree the last time he visited Mount Creation. As a result, he had progressed to gold tier. He had taken a sip of the tea, and the combat aura in his body had grown many times stronger. He was ecstatic at the thought of his strength rapidly improving. However, as he reflected on the event he had witnessed outside, the joy in his heart gradually subsided. He could still see the scene from when he had climbed the mountain. The groups of angels hovering in the sky and the massive tree that blocked the sun were the indications that the mountain's growth had well exceeded his expectations. "How many weapons and medical herbs do you wish to buy, Captain Loftus?" At that moment, Watson's voice interrupted his fantasy. "I've brought 200,000 gold coins with me. I want to buy 100 platinum tier items at 1,000 gold coins each. It was the price that we agreed on last time. As for the medical herbs, I would like to get the ones that could boost my and my subordinates' strength. If you don't have them, then I'll buy the sun gem fruit that I ate last time. I am willing to pay a reasonable price for them." Loftus spoke slowly as he took another sip of tea. Bang! A huge explosion erupted outside just as he was finishing his sentence. A weird red layer blanketed the clouds in the sky, causing a continuous explosion that created dozens of kilometers-long clouds that covered everything. The powerful tremors shook the entire Black Moon Castle, including the walls and the ground. His fingers trembled slightly as he held the teacup, and he stared out the window in astonishment. What happened? Nothing. My master had just advanced to the diamond tier recently. That's what happens when he uses his diamond tier magic. Don't worry. My master will practice outside every day until he is accustomed to it. You are referring to the astrologer? I remember that he was a platinum tier mage many years ago. His power has not changed in years because he drank from the spring of life in the forest of eternity. How did he get to the diamond tier so quickly? Simple. The potion I made with water from the spring of life lifted the curse that had plagued my master. Oh, yes, I do have something to tell you, Captain Loftus. I have created a world tree on Mount Creation. If you want water from the spring of life, I can sell you some. However, I can't sell you the potion that I made from it. Loftus's fingers trembled as Watson explained, and the teacup fell to the ground with a crash. He did not look shocked. He could not keep up with Watson's conversation. If Antonio had progressed to the diamond tier, everything would have been fine. After all, he was the kingdom's best mage. It was not that difficult to find a way to break the curse on his body. However, it was a little ridiculous to create a world tree and produce a large amount of spring water to do that. Everyone in the kingdom knew that the spring of life was only available in the Elven Kingdom. It was their most precious treasure that even the king of the Holy Dragon Kingdom could not get. So, how did Mount Creation have it? Despite how ludicrous it seemed, Loftus believed it in his heart. He had witnessed innumerable angels hovering outside. Mount Creation had only created a large number of angels 10 days before that. It appeared that creating a world tree was not an impossible task. "Young Master Watson, I want to." Loftus finally spoke after a little pause. He was there to help Vermilion Town join Watson's business as a partner, but he changed his mind. He wanted Vermilion Town to join Mount Creation to become a subsidiary of Black Moon Town. A business partner could only spend money to buy supplies there. If they became a subordinate, then they could receive free benefits from Watson. However, he would have to obey Watson's orders if they were to become a subordinate town. It was not impossible, especially if they get rewards like water from the spring of life or a transformation to an angel. "What are you thinking?" Watson asked. Boom! They heard another explosion before Loftus could answer the question. He looked out the window. What happened? Is that the astrologer working on his magic again? No, that's the platinum tier mages in manors around Mount Creation. They use it once every 2 to 3 days to water the crops and herbs. People from Torch Town are also using their platinum tier special ability to increase their speed in forging weapons. As you may have known, the weakest person on Mount Creation is also a platinum tier elite. It is quite common for them to make a lot of noise when they are doing something. Watson blinked. His voice was not loud, but his words were thunderous. It caused Loftus to fall into a daze. Everyone on the entire mountain was platinum tier. He thought that Watson had only created a group of angels. He did not expect Watson would allow everyone on the mountain to compete for their advancement. What kind of concept was that? After a long while, Loftus finally snapped back to his senses. He swallowed his saliva and stood up abruptly from his chair. "Young Master Watson, I take back what I just said. Vermilion Town no longer wants to deal with Mount Creation. We want to become a part of this place. I don't know if it's still too late to make that choice." Chapter 262, 3 Gifts. Congratulations, Captain Loftus, on making the right decision. It is not too late to join Mount Creation. Sign the contract, and Vermilion Town will become Mount Creation's subordinate town. You will be treated in the same manner as the other towns. Watson pulled a contract from under the table and handed it to Loftus. He smiled as if he had known Loftus would make that decision. Loftus took a deep breath and dipped a pen in ink from the side of the table. He wrote his name on the contract. He did not even read the contract's contents carefully because he felt it was unnecessary. Initially, he had wanted Vermilion Town to become Mount Creation's partner instead of a subordinate town. On the one hand, it was due to Adele's absence. On the other hand, he did not want Vermilion Town to be inferior to the other towns. However, once he had seen Mount Creation's power, he knew that they had outclassed Vermilion Town several times fold. If Watson allowed him to transform into an angel and acquire immortality, he was willing to be Black Moon Town's slave, let alone their subordinate town. Watson took the contract that he had signed and had a look at it. He placed it aside after ensuring that there were no problems and nodded. "Very good. You can inform those people outside to return to Vermilion Town. Then, tell the locals that I will be using magic to fuse Vermilion Town with Mount Creation. I hope they won't freak out." "Certainly, Honorable Master Watson." Loftus's address changed after signing the deal. He turned around and exited the room. The guards that went to the mountain with him were also there. They waited patiently for him with a few boxes in their hands. Those boxes contained the 200,000 gold coins that they had brought from their town. Loftus and Watson had a one-on-one talk. Those guards were asked to wait outside. When they saw Loftus walk out of the room, a few soldiers encircled him and questioned him. "Captain Loftus, how did the discussion with Mount Creation go? Did they agree to offer us valuable items and herbs?" "Captain, you might not have noticed it earlier, but the sky became crimson, and an explosion blew up all the clouds. The force of the explosion nearly made me pee my trousers. At that point, a dark cloud appeared in the sky. Thunder roared as lightning flashed, yet the rain fell in one direction and continued to pour. It was as if someone was in charge of it. It was very magical." Loftus waved his hand in response to the guard's statements. "Do not say anything else. The deal was cancelled. Let's return to Vermilion Town." "Cancelled?" The guards mistook Loftus and Watson's conversation for a failure when they heard that. Captain Loftus, didn't Mount Creation promise that they would sell you weapons and items? They asked, a little irritably. Why are they going back on their word now? Seriously, if we knew that this was going to happen, we would not have come. We still have 200,000 gold coins with us. Don't tell me they don't like that amount of money? It's not what you think. We didn't make a deal with them. It's not because they went back on their word, but because I chose to let Vermilion Town join them. From now on, Vermilion Town is Mount Creation's subordinate town. Loftus explained to them, and his reaction aggravated the guards even more. Captain Loftus, Mayor Adele asked you to help manage the town before she left. Is this how you manage it? One of the guards asked him. Another guard nodded worriedly. If Mayor Adele knew that you had sold the town while she was away, I wonder how furious she would get. We would also suffer with you. Everyone in Vermilion Town knew of Adele's iron fists. They were very worried about their future. Watson went out of the room with a stack of contracts as everyone was in a discussion. He glanced at the squabbling guards and then at Loftus, who had a dark expression on his face. He grinned and said, Captain Loftus, I forgot to tell you. You and your guards here will get 3 gifts from me after you've finally joined Mount Creation. As he spoke, Watson snapped his fingers, and numerous sets of platinum-colored armor and long swords plummeted from the sky, landing in front of Loftus and the guards. The first reward consists of platinum-tier armor and longsword. The second reward is a phoenix egg for each of you. A loud and distinct phoenix cry resounded from the skies, trailing closely after the armor and weapons. Following that, a few bright rays of light fell from the sky, transforming into round phoenix eggs that landed on the armor and burned with a holy white flame. It would shift into the shadow of a phoenix at times and then condense into an ice crystal flower at others. The third reward is a potion that can give you immortality and promote you to platinum tier. Watson curled his hand around the ring. The ground beneath his feet split apart, revealing a gleaming green liquid. Above his head, a black hole opened, and pitch-black blood flew out with some bones. The green liquid was the spring of life, which was considerably more limited than before. The blood and bones were copies extracted from Lilith's body. It was a little inhumane to utilize Lilith's blood and bone marrow because they needed to manufacture millions of blessings of the gods and demons. Watson decided to allow people to make their own wishes to reproduce Lilith's blood and bones. The items in front of him were the remnants of prior wishes. System fusion, activate. Watson merged the spring of life with the Hellbarrow blood in the air to create 5 gods' blessings. He pushed them toward Loftus and the others with a wind elemental spell. The diamond tier item, the gods' blessings, was a sphere that flickered with black and green lights. The 2 colors alternately flashed, emitting an enticing attraction. Loftus and the others could not stop themselves from reaching out to grab it. Watson beckoned with his hand before their hands reached the items, and a gust of wind swept the 5 beads, the phoenix eggs, and the platinum tier armor back into his hand. I was going to give these to you, but I heard someone say they did not want to join us? Perhaps I can return the contract to you, Captain Loftus? We don't like to force outsiders to join us. Do not be concerned, young Master Watson. They were only babbling nonsense. We are not afraid to ascend the mountain. Furthermore, I am now the acting mayor of Vermilion Town, Loftus said hesitantly as he gave Watson a flattering smile. If I said that Vermilion Town would join Mount Creation, then we will join you. No one has the right to object to it. If anyone dares to oppose, then I will eliminate them. Watson placed the platinum tier armor and weaponry in front of him, as well as the elixir that could turn someone into a platinum tier elite. Then, he took them back. It felt as if someone had slipped a fistful of gold into Loftus's pocket and then hastily removed it. How could he stand that? It is reassuring to hear that, Captain Loftus. Watson shoved the gift in front of Loftus again. Loftus was worried that Watson would break his word again, so he immediately ingested the blessings of the gods and demons. Then, 6 white wings protruded from his back with a thud. A shining halo appeared above his head, and a platinum tier aura surrounded him. This is fantastic. I've made it to the platinum tier, and I am now an angel. Loftus had an excited grin on his face when he looked at himself. He thought he had been dreaming when he saw the angels in the sky during their hike up the mountain. However, he had also transformed into an angel. One could say that his dream had come true. Can that potion truly transform someone into a platinum tier elite? The guards who had been hesitating could no longer do so after witnessing his captain's change. They took their rewards, one after another. Some were eager to try the platinum tier armor, while others licked the phoenix egg. Of course, the first thing they did was to ingest blessings of the gods and demons. Chapter 263. A Unified Border, 2 years later. Didn't you say that you are not willing to join Mount Creation and that you would suffer if you did? If you are not willing to join us, why did you consume young Master Watson's potion? Loftus discovered that his buddies had eaten the blessings of the gods and demons. They had also evolved into angels. He pursed his lips. Captain Loftus, have a look at those. If Mayor Adele were here, she would undoubtedly agree. I could only guess her response. I did not mean to go against it, a guard explained as he retracted the angel wings on his back. He massaged his platinum tier armor tenderly. You're right. Who said anything about not going up the mountain? Did anyone say something like that? I did not. The rest of the guards played dumb. They were concerned that Adele might become enraged if they accepted those rewards, but they no longer give a D***mn. Adele's thoughts had nothing to do with them. After all, she could not make them advance to platinum tier or provide them eternal life. However, Watson could do it. If someone had told them before they arrived at the mountain that there was a potion in the world that could turn people into platinum tier, they would have believed those people were insane. They had changed their mind. They realized just how foolish they were. Shameless. Loftus adjusted his attitude and walked swiftly toward Watson after snorting coldly at his subordinates. Young Master Watson, thank you so much for giving me these gifts, he said politely as he knelt on one knee. I shall travel to Vermilion Town right now and tell the people there to join Mount Creation. Go ahead. I shall wait for your good news. Loftus stood up and bowed deeply to Watson again as the younger man waved his hand. He turned around and flew away from Mount Creation, accompanied by his 4 subordinates. They had used the magical route established outside Mount Creation when they arrived, but since they had advanced to Platinum Tier and became angels, they could use their wings to fly instead. They wanted to experience that feeling since they had just advanced. Watson stretched his back as he watched Loftus and the others left. He said, I knew that Vermilion Town would join the Mount Creation. The border will be unified when Mount Creation merges with Vermilion Town, as I had predicted. My plan for the border's transformation will come to an end, and I can go to the royal city without any worry. He tilted his head to look at the distant sky, which was in the direction of the center of the Holy Dragon Kingdom. He had never forgotten that the king had sent Moriarty to destroy the border. He had not left because he was worried about his family and friends in Black Moon Town. However, everyone on Mount Creation had advanced to Platinum Tier, and they had also obtained immortality. Even if the kingdom sent all their troops to attack them, they might not be able to capture them. Even if they were caught, they would not die either. He could finally be at ease. Based on the time flow on Mount Creation, I think Loftus will return in 2 to 3 days. I'll go back and make preparations first. Watson had predicted that, but Loftus had returned after only 1 day. The trip to Vermilion Town to spread the word about joining Mount Creation had gone off without a hitch. Vermilion Town had already been affected by Mount Creation before that. For example, a magical passage that could move on its own was that. For example, the magic passage that could automatically move was built in front of the town's gates. There was also the enigmatic Platinum Tier material discovered in the initial hot stone mine. Those objects had always seemed magical to the locals. That wonderful feeling was projected onto Mount Creation after they learned that those things came from the mountain. That was not the most crucial point. The fact that Loftus and the others had returned to town was the most essential thing. They had a halo above their heads, which symbolized that they were angels. They were also in Platinum Tier armor and had a rare treasure, the Phoenix Egg. Would the rest of them obtain a set of Platinum Tier armor as well? They would not be able to get even a sliver of iron on the armor, let alone the Platinum Tier armor. Would they be able to make it to the Platinum Tier? Even more so, they were unlikely to accomplish that in their lifetime. Platinum Tier armor was already equal to that of the king. There were only a few Platinum Tier elites in the kingdom. They would be able to gain something that they could not get even if they worked hard for 10 lifetimes unless they joined Mount Creation. Who could possibly refuse that offer? Even if Adele were there, she would make the same choice too. Plus, Adele had left Vermilion Town for the royal city. There was no one to stop them. Within 2 hours, everyone in town had approved the plan to join Mount Creation and become a subordinate town. They went home and waited for the time when their town would be fused with Mount Creation. Then, Loftus hurried back to Mount Creation to give his report. Watson did not hesitate after receiving Loftus's report. He immediately started the fusion. He fused Vermilion Town with Mount Creation, transforming it into a town south of the mountain. When that was done, all the towns and borders along the border were merged into one, and they were under Black Moon Town's control. That day was not only a historic day at the border, it was also a day that would go down in the Holy Dragon Kingdom's history. The legend of Watson and the Black Moon Knights would spread over the entire continent from that point onward. That day was the 31st of the first month of the 222nd year of the Holy Dragon calendar. The third month of the 222nd year of the Holy Dragon calendar had come to an end. Vermilion Town had joined Mount Creation for 2 months, and Mount Creation had been in operation for nearly 2 years. Mount Creation had changed dramatically in those 2 years. First, a spiral staircase had been built around the World Tree at the summit of Mount Creation. There were numerous diamond trees on both sides of the stairs. Upon closer inspection, those diamond-like trees were revealed to be diamond-tier magical staffs with diamond branches and leaves sprouting from them. Rooms hovered in midair around the spiral staircase. Fruits, weapons, armor, medicinal herbs, and other goods were in them. Each room was a massive octahedron, and the goods heaped inside were all of the same kind. No one knew the height of the spiral staircase, and no one counted how many rooms were there too. Angels with massive chests swooped through the skies from time to time and came to the transparent rooms. They emptied the contents of the chests into the chambers. A group of knights in black armor flew past in the higher sky. They had 6 wings on their backs, which were similarly covered in black armor. Giant dragons galloped beneath them, lifting their heads and roaring at the sky. It has been 2 years and I have not realized it. Mount Creation has endured earth-shattering transformations. A 1.6-meter-tall youth stood on a shaded lawn beneath the World Tree. He had his hands crossed behind his head and a blade of grass in his teeth as he looked up in the sky. Yes, the resources on Mount Creation are increasing at an exponential rate every day. We couldn't even cover everyone at the border at first, but after a few months, those things had overrun the fields and streets. We didn't even have any space to put them. Then, we turned silver tier weapons to gold tier and gold tier ones into platinum tier. Even then, the resources continued to grow. Fortunately, you managed to build a spiral tower on the World Tree and stored the excess resources in the sky, which solved the problem. The voice of a mature man echoed from the youth's side. The individual had 2 little black horns on his brow. He had pointy ears, and his purple eyes shone a demonic light. It was Sylvan. He had taken the blessings of the gods and demons and transformed into a fallen elf. Sylvan's aura was 5 times greater than it had been 2 years before that. It was as though he had walked into a diamond. The attractive young man with blue eyes stood opposite him. Even though his aura was platinum tier at best, it was even more enigmatic than a diamond tier aura. It was Watson. Chapter 264. A new journey, a new beginning. 2 years was neither too long nor too short. Watson had a really fulfilling 2 years. His level had not improved, but his strength had increased dozens of times during the past year. That was because he had been training and learning every day for the past 2 years. First, he had to learn magic from Antonio and Sylvan. One was the most powerful mage in the kingdom, while the other was the greatest mage in the kingdom. They possessed a thorough understanding of magic. For example, they could not cast spells that took too long to cast when they faced warriors with a short attack range. When confronted with a mage with the same long attack range, they first had to identify the opponent's magical attributes. When facing 1 or more people, the spells they had to cast were also different. Those were all valuable battle experiences. Watson had relied on the overwhelming power of his fusion magic in battle, but things had changed. His battle style had become exquisite, and he was already a full-fledged mage. He had learned all the spells that Antonio and Sylvan had mastered, in addition to his own experiences. The spells that the two of them knew ranged from iron to platinum tier and included the 6 qualities of earth, fire, water, wind, light, and darkness. Platinum tier spells accounted for only 10% of those spells. They became diamond tier spells after Watson fused them. One could say that Watson knew more spells than Antonio, and the intensity of his spells was also greater than Sylvan's. His skills as a warrior did not suffer while he was learning magic. Every day, he would check in with Elvira, Ron, and Nightingale. Their military experiences were undeniably superior to his. His swordsmanship had also advanced swiftly under their tutelage, and he was already a platinum-tier warrior. After all, the caliber of the provider was different. He had mastered swordsmanship, but it was still much inferior to magic. His master assured him that he had called an old friend in the royal city, who was supposed to be an expert swordsman. He could learn from the man if he were to go there. Winter outside of Mount Creation also lasted for 3 months. Watson decided to pack his belongings and travel to the capital. "Watson, today's magic lesson is not quite done yet. We have plenty of time to practice." Sylvan sat up on the grass and beckoned Watson with his finger. "Forget it, Lord Sylvan. Every day, I train for 24 hours. It is rare for me to take a break before leaving. I don't want to fight anymore. Plus, this place is quite close to the World Tree. It won't be good if we break the World Tree because we can't control the magic. Stop this nonsense, Watson. You and Master Antonio are leaving. I'll be the only person on the mountain for a long time. It's not easy for me to advance to Diamond Tier. It would be too lonely if I didn't have a worthy adversary. At the very least, you should spend more time with me every day for the next few days." Sylvan's eyes lit up with kindness as he gazed at Watson. Then, with his right hand extended, he said, "Absolute explosion." He used his finger to point at the air and grass on the ground and dyed them red. They were transformed into deadly bombs. They detonated, one after the other, and the airwaves from the successive explosions converged. A sweltering wind blew right at Watson. The terrible power appeared to be capable of uprooting the ground within a few kilometers. Watson had cast the absolute explosion spell on Sylvan and Antonio 2 years before that. That Diamond Tier magic had already been extensively studied by the two of them for 2 years, so it no longer drained their energy when they cast it. Their method was to cast the magic with one hand and stab their heart with the other, dropping down amid the blood splashes. The cut on his chest healed quickly, and he could stand up again. They used death to counteract the absolute explosion spell. The strength in his body would not be exhausted if he were to die. Since he had obtained immortality, the Black Moon Knights did not hold back until he had murdered his opponents throughout the training. That approach imbued all Black Moon Knights with a murderous aura that existed only after thousands of deaths. What Sylvan did then was child's play compared to the Black Moon Knights. Boom, boom, boom. The environment was filled with muffled sounds. When confronted with Sylvan's attack, Watson, who had matured, wore a look of helplessness on his handsome face. Then he drew his arm from behind his head and elevated it. Perfect seal. The flames and explosions that had filled the sky fell silent with a swoosh as they spread to Watson's surroundings. Then they quickly condensed into a small red dot that vanished into the air. It was as if nothing had changed. The surroundings were still alive with birds and flowers. "You can't use the absolute seal, Watson. If you use that ability, neither you nor I will be able to use magic. It's against the rules." "Oh, well, Lord Sylvan, you may proceed." Draping the true red battle armor on your body, the destructive fire of calamity churned in your palm and condensed into brand new suns. The ringing sound was like an elegy: "Cleave the heavenly court, cast the stars." Diamond Tier fire elemental magic, Vermilion Nova Barrage. Sylvan chanted the incantation swiftly. In a single moment, dozens of bright red suns appeared in the sky with a wave of his hand. They plummeted abruptly, burning everything and scorching the air into ripples. That maneuver was an improved version of Sylvan's most potent spell in 2 years. They were significantly more powerful, whether it was due to the quantity of mimicked suns or their might. Watson was calm. Then, he read a long paragraph of runes. "Freeze the extreme cold of space and time, return to the absolute temperature of death, let the ice age come again." Diamond Tier spell, 9 layers of absolute zero. Watson's body was enveloped in a similar milky white fog as soon as his voice faded, shutting off space and time. It extended to the fiery red suns that Sylvan had launched. The suns immediately compressed into solid ice, like an amber-sealed bug. The ice shattered, and the suns inside shattered as well, turning into a red streak that would not melt. That was one of the diamond tier spells that he had combined with the platinum tier spells that Antonio and Sylvan had taught him. That spell would cast absolute zero 9 times in a row, and the combined power was enough to destroy everything. Therefore, it was called 9 layers of absolute zero. Sylvan's magic was instantly overwhelmed by the amplification of the Loan script to the spell. The Loan script that Watson had discovered in the Dragonspine Snow Mountain was the language of an ancient race, angels and devils. Watson could use it after his transformation into an angel. It could boost the rune's impact on magic. If he used the runes and not the same magic, the difference in power would be 2 to 3 times greater. Watson, you are not allowed to use the runes either. We must use human language in our chants. The duel has to be fair. Fair? Do you understand? It's just like when I entered the diamond tier and mastered absolute defense, and I have never used it on you, Sylvan complained. He looked dissatisfied. During those 2 years, he and Antonio had taught Watson and vice versa. Watson's magic was fused with theirs and passed on to them. He could advance to the diamond tier within 2 years because of the spells that Watson had fused. Plus, he had eaten well and accumulated a large number of magic elements as well. He had only mastered the absolute defensive spell after entering the diamond tier. As the name implied, no attack could break his defense as long as he had used the absolute defense spell. However, he could not use it in an attack. He had cast the spell on Watson for a different reason. The younger man had mastered stronger spells than he did. Watson had initially only mastered 2 spells, the Absolute Burst and the Absolute Seal. Watson had also learned Absolute Time Freeze and Absolute Defense as a result of Antonio and his lessons. In addition to those criteria, Watson had combined all of the platinum tier spells he had learned with other qualities, resulting in a slew of new ones. For example, his Absolute Magic Immunity spell could negate the opponent's magical effects, and the Absolute Hits spell could counter all attacks, no matter combat techniques or magic. There was also the Absolute Sight spell, which could prevent him from being blinded by fog or any other distracting spells, and the Absolute Luck spell that could bring him luck all the time. In those 2 years, Watson had fused more than 40 types of diamond tier spells. If they were not diamond tier spells, their power would still be more than that of an ordinary diamond tier expert. Therefore, Sylvan simply banned all the spells. Otherwise, Watson would use them to end the battle all too quickly. All right, Lord Sylvan, as you wish. Watson had no choice but to obey Sylvan's instructions and abandon the Loan tongue. Instead, he began to chant the spells in human language. Within a short while, a slew of platinum tier spells materialized all around him. All 6 attributes were present: earth, fire, water, wind, light, and darkness. For example, the summoning of the giant rock golem, the simplified version of the Vermilion Nova bullet that Sylvan had just used, and the super large black hole. The spells were combined to form a flood of elements that surged toward Sylvan. Aside from magic, Watson also used the law of domain beneath his feet. They overlapped and turned into layers of halos that wrapped around him, illuminating him as if he were a god. After a long while, Watson, this is a magic competition. Why are you using the law of domain that is unique to platinum tier warriors? You can also release spells of the 6 basic elements, but not the 7th element, the chaotic elemental magic. You also can't use the platinum tier ring on your finger or the platinum tier armor on your body. If you use it, you'd be breaking the rules. Watson shrugged helplessly and rose from the grass when he heard Sylvan's babbling. You won't let me use this or that, Lord Sylvan. Why don't you just tie my wrists and ankles, and I'll let you hit me without retaliation. Chapter 265. Heading to the capital. Forget about it. I'm not going to fight you anymore. I'll be the first to say that I am no match for you. Your progress is far too rapid. You have gone from being not my match to being able to smash me in just 2 years. The Sword Saint, I believe, is the only person in the kingdom who can take you head on. Sylvan waved his hand dejectedly after he heard Watson's words. The dignified border count had bowed his head and admitted defeat to a 12-year-old boy. It would be great if that were heard anywhere in the kingdom. That sort of behavior was fairly common on Mount Creation. I have heard Lord Sylvan and Master talk about the Sword Saint. Is he a powerful man? Watson inquired. He is the only person in the Holy Dragon Kingdom who has openly entered the Diamond Tier. Would you say he is strong? Sylvan did not respond directly. Instead, he responded with a question. Watson's eyes widened with interest. So, who is more powerful, the Sword Saint or my master? Antonio had been trapped at Platinum Tier due to the Spring of Life's curse. He was on the same level as the Sword Saint since he had advanced to the Diamond Tier. It was difficult to tell who was stronger between those two. Of course, the Sword Saint is stronger. There is no comparison at all. Contrary to Watson's expectations, Sylvan shook his head. A nostalgic expression appeared on his face. The Sword Saint is the most powerful person in the entire kingdom, and he is also the most talented person I have ever met. Oh, of course, I have to exclude you. If Master Antonio is a genius, then the Sword Saint is the genius of geniuses. He became a Silver Tier warrior at the age of 12, and since then, he has made significant progress until he reached the Diamond Tier. Furthermore, he reached the peak of the Diamond Tier as soon as he entered it. Watson, you should understand my hatred for the king. Aside from the fact that his Dragon Knight Legion is extremely formidable, the reason I have not made a move in such a long time is that I am terrified of the Sword Saint. Watson's face was filled with amazement as he listened to Sylvan's comments. Who is this Sword Saint, and why is he so powerful? To put it another way, Master Antonio had no defense against a sword attack from the Sword Saint. He should be able to endure 3 sword attacks now that he has entered the Diamond Tier and mastered several formidable spells. Was that a joke? Watson understood that the higher one's cultivation, the more difficult it was to advance further. The wider the separation between various people, the longer one would stay in the same tier. It was not rare for 2 people to be at the Diamond Tier and for one of them to be able to kill the other instantaneously. However, Sylvan went a little too far in claiming that Antonio could not survive 3 sword strikes from the Sword Saint. His master, after all, was a magnificent man whose fame rocked the Holy Dragon Kingdom. He had roughly 1,000 magic spells under his control, but it seemed like those spells could not withstand 3 sword attacks from the other party. How powerful was the Sword Saint? Watson would be on his way to the Royal City, and Sylvan's comments piqued his interest about the road he would take soon. Sylvan, you are an annoyance. I haven't seen you in a while, and you've already told Watson about my past. Don't you know how to protect your teacher's reputation? An old disgruntled voice echoed from behind them. Watson turned his head to see that it was his master, Antonio. He was carrying a 1-year-old girl on his shoulder. She was sucking on a pacifier and touching Antonio's gorgeous face with her tiny pink hands. Uncle, play with me, she said in a baby voice. Angel, be good. I wish to speak with your brother. I will play with you later. Antonio smiled at the young child. His wrinkles were pinched like chrysanthemums. Angel, the little girl, was only a year old. She was Watson's younger sister. Edward had always wanted to give Watson a sister, but his plan was only realized after he and Catherine had transformed into angels. Angel was born into the angel race, and she was a pure-blooded angel with 12 wings. As an angel, Angel's strength was at Platinum Tier, and she had shown a strong talent for magic. Her family considered her their hope for the future because she could learn magic from Antonio pretty swiftly. They even thought that her achievements would surpass Watson's. Antonio adored the little girl. He was like her grandfather, and he accompanied her daily. Brother? Angel's huge, bright blue eyes twitched when she heard Antonio mention Watson. She immediately lit up as she approached Watson. The 12 small white wings on her back spread open before she flew out of Antonio's arms. She landed in front of Watson and opened her arms to greet him. Hug, brother. Watson seemed helpless as he hugged Angel. Even though he was no longer the youngest child because he had a younger sister at home, that sister seemed quite attached to him. She would let him hug and play with her whenever she saw him. Watson, you have spent a long time on Mount Creation, and it seems like winter has come and gone outside of the mountain. You can travel to the capital the next day. No, you might as well leave later. You can return Angel to me now. Master, you're not going to the capital with me? Watson was even more speechless when he noticed the envy in Antonio's eyes when he stared at him. Antonio had taken an unhealthy liking to Angel. He even wanted to chase him away because of that. Antonio would take her with him, but his parents would never agree to that. I wish I could stay here indefinitely. It is a shame. I have been away from the capital for so long. It is time for me to go back. Antonio averted his eyes from Angel, his face darkened. Watson, You are not like me. You still have the right to choose. Are you sure you want to visit the capital? Based on Mount Creation's current strength, even if you don't go out, you can still live here happily for your entire life. If you do go out, it will cause more trouble. The kingdom is bigger than you think, and its waters are deeper. Master, you are right. I have made my decision. Then, take one last look at this land. Say goodbye to this place, and we'll be on our way. After he said that, Antonio turned around and strolled to the top of the mountain with the Diamond World Tree staff. It was as if he wanted to go and pack his luggage. However, his figure evoked an inexplicable sense of melancholy. Watson seemed to sense something when he saw his master's back. He twitched his lips, but in the end, he was hesitant to say anything. An hour later, at the foot of Mount Creation, Watson and Antonio had gathered their belongings and stood in the path that connected Mount Creation to the outside world. The person sending them off stood in front of them. Remember to listen to Master Antonio on the journey to the royal city, Watson. Take care. Nindi, his second sister, was the first to emerge from the mob and embraced Watson. Nindi had matured into a capable leader of the mages in 2 years. Her chestnut hair fell to her waist, and her mature face was well defined. She exuded an inexplicable aura. Watson, I believe it is best to dispatch the Black Moon Knights to accompany you on your journey to avoid any risk. We can send 1,000 knights with you. Vincent, Watson's eldest brother, was the second person to bid him farewell. His eldest sibling was like a mountain. His physique exuded a dreadful sense of oppression, and his bulging biceps crammed his black platinum armor to the brim. If Nindi was an unpredictably violent sea, then his eldest brother, Vincent, was a towering mountain that one could not scale. Thank you very much, eldest brother and second sister. I will pay attention to Master's words. You must take care too. There's no need to send the Black Moon Knights with us. Very few people would harm us, not with my current strength and Master's power. It would be a bit pretentious to send the Black Moon Knights with us. Watson had a faint recollection of his eldest brother and second sister's appearance back then. His brother almost married a young woman from a manor because he had wanted to protect their family. In the end, it brought disaster for their family. His second sister had joined the Mage Guild in Monty Town. The guild's elder, Fulson, had pushed for an attack on Black Moon Castle, and she was taken hostage too. The image of his siblings gradually overlapped with their stronger selves. He was sad when he thought about that. Watson, go on your journey without any worry. Your mother and I will work harder on having more babies, and when you return, we will try to give you a few younger brothers and sisters. Watson's recollection was shattered as his father's voice echoed. It made him curse helplessly in his heart. After all those years, his father had not changed. His relatives came forward to bid him farewell. The mayors were also there, and also some of the people that Watson knew. Have a safe journey, young Master Watson. I wish you many serendipitous encounters along the way as you seek to establish your name in the kingdom. Elvira, Torchtown's heavenly daughter, walked forward and bowed at Watson. As a distant relative of the Campbells, I will be visiting them soon. We might have the opportunity to meet in the royal city. Don't worry, young Master Watson. We shall return to our families in the royal city soon. We'll find an opportunity to see you. Aside from Andre, the mayors of Mount Creation's towns, Durant, Lubin, and Loftus, were sobbing gently. They appeared reluctant. The people on Mount Creation were quite lucky to have met Watson in such a short period. Not everyone was so fortunate. Can I accompany you to the royal city, Watson? Nightingale was the one who posed the question. She had just turned 18, entering the most beautiful period of a woman's life after 2 years on Mount Creation. Watson could feel her longing expression in her pitch-black eyes, so he turned around and said, I am sorry, Miss Nightingale. I will be there to take the Royal Academy's test. I am there to be a student rather than a tourist, so, Watson, take Nightingale with you. After all, you and your master can't go on the road without someone to serve you. Sylvan, who was also sending them off, interrupted. It is customary to bring 1 or 2 handmaidens with you. When an average suburban noble goes to the royal city to study, they do the same thing too. This is about a noble's dignity. But, Watson had wanted to say something when Sylvan interrupted him again. I am the border count. I hope you can bring Nightingale with you. You won't deny my request, right? Very well. Watson had no choice but to agree. I will go prepare the carriage, Nightingale said. first with a grateful gaze to Sylvie and then with a look of uncontrollable excitement. Then she walked down Mount Creation. The other individuals who saw her go, particularly the maids, were not pleased with the outcome. They screamed, "We don't want to leave you, young Master Watson. We'll be lonely without you." Watson was forced to choose a maid named Denise from among them to serve him and Nightingale. Most of them would not know Denise's name, but her other name was quite well known, Envy. She knew all about the royal city as she was the former queen's personal maid. Therefore, it would be quite handy to bring her with them. Watson wanted her to return there for a visit. Watson followed Antonio after he had chosen his maid. He stepped forward as he took one final look at the familiar and gorgeous backdrop of Mount Creation. It was time for a new adventure. Chapter 266. The City of Adventurers and the Buried City. Creak, creak. The horse carriage traveled on a gravel road flanked by towering trees. Those trees were much inferior to Mount Creation's platinum or even diamond tier trees. There were no magical fruits on the tree trunks that one might use to advance to the gold tier. They looked ordinary. The winter had ended. There was still some ice and snow on the ground that had not completely melted, making it difficult to walk on the roads. It would be great if Mount Creation had paved routes to the kingdom's various villages. At the very least, the roadways would be easier to walk on. I can even charge them a fee. Watson leaned against the carriage's window, taking in the view beyond. He yawned out of boredom. Of course, he knew that was impossible because the border was Sylvan's domain. He could integrate the border into Mount Creation upon Sylvan's agreement. However, it was different outside the border. The king's domain laid beyond the border. Someone would undoubtedly report him if he dared to fuse the area without the king's authorization. The king's army would await his arrival. The first city they would reach was the City of Steel, part of the king's domain. It was approximately 2 days away from the border. Another moniker for that place was the City of Adventurers. It was named that because the city was teeming with explorers. Most of the legendary adventurers in Misty Forest were from there. Other than the border, most of them were willing to go to one other place outside the City of Steel. It was a ruin named the Underground City Maze. That ruin had lasted ever since Landhar established the kingdom about 400 years before. Experts speculated that the ruin had existed thousands of years ago, and it could even be older. Its massive construction was the size of a city. In addition, another legend was mentioned in the Underground City. A few decades ago, the most powerful person in the kingdom, the Sword Saint, was still quite young. He had been there to investigate. He descended to the underground city's lowest level and received a holy weapon. People said that the Sword Saint had become the most powerful person in the kingdom because of his ability to clear the dungeon. The rumor about how he would amass a large amount of wealth and reach the peak of his life after clearing the underground city's 100th level spread like wildfire. Of course, other than the Sword Saint, no one else had managed to clear the underground city's dungeons for the past few decades. Each level had many magical beasts, and they could regenerate after a period. Many adventurers only wanted to kill those magical beasts to make some money. Young Master Watson, even though the winter has ended, and the Holy Dragon Kingdom is entering spring, it is still very cold outside. Please sit in the carriage so that you won't catch a cold, Denise said. She was one of the Demoness Bandit Gang's original members. She wrapped a cowhide blanket over Watson's legs. Watson is a platinum tier elite. Is he afraid of changing weather? When she heard Denise's comments, Nightingale, who was driving, turned around. Her eyes sparkled with envy as she saw Denise covered Watson with a blanket. She wished she could trade places with Denise. Watson had arranged for her to stay outdoors because she was skilled, and Denise knew the kingdom better. Young Master Watson may not be concerned about the weather, but as maids, we must be considerate, even if it is something that our master does not require. Furthermore, young Master Watson will not want to show off his strength. Otherwise, he would not have asked us to accompany him. It's obviously better to choose the Black Moon Knights to escort him, Denise explained slowly. Antonio, who was also in the carriage, awoke from his slumber. He rolled over and fell asleep again. A satisfied smile was on his face. Watson nodded. Miss Denise is right. I only have one request for this trip, and that is to keep a low profile. After all, we are going to the royal city to investigate the king. If we attract any attention, our enemies might ambush us before we reach our destination. I even disguised the wish for the world ring on my hand and transformed the sky-devouring Rat King as an ordinary horse. Nightingale was sitting on Little Gray, the sky-devouring Rat King. If the sky-devouring Rat King ate something, it would divide its body indefinitely and gain food attributes. Watson had permitted it to consume the Golden Flash and Emperor Cluck's blood at irregular intervals, and it duplicated many small dragons and phoenixes. Watson gave the duplicates to his subordinates. The Black Moon Knight's dragon mounts on Mount Creation were the sky-devouring Rat King's duplicates. As a result, the Black Moon Knights became an army no inferior to the Dragon Knights. Similarly, they had a large number of phoenix eggs that they could not finish daily. The phoenix eggs had become a consumable item, the same as regular eggs. Watson raised his right hand to show Nightingale the rusty rings that had become gray on his fingers. Nightingale, from now on, just treat me like a normal person, just like Denise did, he said. I got it. Nightingale pursed her lips and switched her attention back to the road. Watson wrapped a blanket around himself and feigned to be scared of the cold as he asked, Miss Denise, we've been away from the border for half a day, and we are not far from the first city we will visit. Tell me everything I need to know about the kingdom before we get to the City of Steel. Denise cleared her throat. She began to explain. The Holy Dragon Kingdom is vast and occupies the central area of the entire continent. Millions of kilometers of land are pregnant with tens of millions of people. Of course, the crops grown on those lands are not enough to eat. Every year, farmers die of hunger. A few years ago, the kingdom even had a famine, and many people died. Denise swallowed and cleared her throat. The Holy Dragon Kingdom is large and occupies the core part of the entire continent, she said. Tens of millions of people populate millions of square kilometers of land. Of course, the crops grown on those grounds are insufficient. Every year, farmers perish as a result of starvation. A few years ago, the kingdom experienced a famine, and many people died. Denise's voice was soft when she said that. She appeared to be thinking about the beautiful life on Mount Creation. Everyone had enough to eat, but there were also much too many resources to go around. They were obliged to congregate in the skies. It was far superior to the other areas in the kingdom. First, let me explain the kingdom's structure. The royal family rules the realm, with the king wields the most power. The Holy See assists him. So the Holy Dragon Kingdom is a constitutional monarchy with divine authority? Watson asked. Divine authority? Denise did not quite understand the two nouns that Watson had said, but she could roughly understand what Watson meant, so she nodded. Of course, young Master Watson is right. The king does not have complete sovereignty over the Holy Dragon Kingdom. The Holy See, who believes in gods, holds at least half the power. They used to worship the primordial demoness and the demon cult. Then, they start to believe in the God of light who created the universe. The Holy See's priests wield the power of faith. That is a separate power from magic and combat aura. It is split into two sections, blessing and curse. It is considered as one of Holy Dragon Kingdom's mainstream training systems. Mainstream? I have never heard of them at the border. Watson rubbed his chin. There were 4 power systems in that world: warriors, mages, archers, and priests. The most common ones at the border were warriors and mages. There were even fewer archers and priests. Only a town like Montytown had a church, and it was quite modest. Perhaps Sylvan's hatred for the church stemmed from the terrible death of his sister as the leader of the demoness cult. Perhaps he did not want the king to discover his little secret because of the infiltration of the church. Therefore, there were few churches and even fewer priests near the border. Watson nodded at Denise after a brief moment of thought, indicating for her to continue. The entire carriage rocked, prompting Watson to mutter, "What happened?" He took a glance out the window. The trees outside the window had vanished, replaced by a massive basin. Many ancient weathered buildings stood in the basin, and it was impossible to tell them apart. Run, run! A group of 4 adventurers hurried out of a weathered structure, bloodied. A few massive lizards with bright red scales were behind them. Their mouths were spewing hot flames as they chased after the men. Chapter 267, Exploring the Buried City. Arthur, it's all your fault. We've only been to the 10th floor, but you insisted that we go down to the 11th floor today. The monster on the 11th floor is a silver-tear flame lizard. We are no match for it, a girl with a red head scarf and goggles growled. The person she reprimanded was a tanned man with mysterious patterns on his face. He retorted unhappily, "Annie, how dare you criticize me? You agreed to enter the 11th floor. All right, Arthur, Annie, stop arguing. The most important thing now is to escape from those silver-tier flame lizards. There's a mysterious restriction outside the dungeon. They can't chase us past a certain area." The team leader was a middle-aged swordsman with yellow hair, a tall figure with a scar on his face. He seemed to be the leader of that adventurer team. What was surprising was that the swordsman held a rare two-handed sword in his hand, and his two swords crossed in a beautiful arc. He barely managed to block the claws of a flame lizard that was fiercely slapping at him. Bang! With a muffled sound, the tall, yellow-haired man retreated more than 10 meters and shouted, "Leon, give me support. Noble Balder, the god of light, your devout servant Leon is offering his faith to you. Please show him mercy and bless him so that his courage and strength can be increased." Leon was the youngest man in the group. He had dark hair and a handsome face, and he was wearing the Holy See's unique clothing. At that moment, he was touching a cross on his chest as he murmured something. As his voice fell, a mysterious light appeared in the sky. It connected to the stars in the distance and covered the yellow-haired man's body. The shadow of an ancient god with a light wheel on his back appeared above his head. It instantly enhanced his speed and strength significantly. The yellow-haired man exerted his strength. He flicked the flame lizard's claws with his two swords and dug a large rock out of the ground. He threw it behind him as an obstacle. Roar! A few fire lizards used their claws to crush the rock. The shattered dust blocked their vision. They shook their heads. When they looked up again, the adventurers had already left the mysterious building. However, the fire lizards were unwilling to give up. After they circled for a while, they entered a massive hole under the ancient building. "Phew, we've finally escaped. We almost died. It seems that we should not have explored down there. We should have just stayed at the 10th level." After they escaped, the young girl, Annie, sat down on the ground. She took off the goggles on her face and panted heavily. It was all thanks to Captain Clyde. If it were not for the captain blocking the giant flame lizard's advancement toward us, we would have been in trouble. The muscular man, Arthur, whose face had patterns on it, also sat down. "You should really thank Leon. That devout priest gave me God's blessing at the critical moment. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to stop a silver-tier magical beast." Clyde was holding onto his two swords. He shook his head and looked at Leon, who stood at the end of the group. The young priest just bowed modestly in response to his flattery. In any case, the captain and the priest were of great use just now. The most useless person was Arthur. He couldn't help at all and almost got us killed. The young girl, Annie, pouted. When she said that, Arthur immediately became angry. He retorted, "Annie, what are you saying? Did you do anything during our escape just now? What right do you have to criticize me? I'm a girl. As a man, don't you feel useless comparing yourself to me? Do you want to fight?" Clyde frowned and wanted to say something as he saw Annie and Arthur were about to start a fight. However, at that very moment, a young voice echoed from somewhere nearby. "Excuse me, we're traveling from the border. We want to go to the City of Steel to do business. Is it convenient to ask you to lead the way?" The adventurers raised their heads and saw a carriage had stopped in front of them. It looked simple, pulled by an ordinary black horse. However, the driver did not look like an average person. It was a beautiful woman with black shoulder-length hair and deep eyes. Her face was as delicate as a sculpture, and her figure was even more voluptuous. Arthur and Annie subconsciously ceased their argument when they noticed the person driving the carriage. Arthur's eyes were a little blank as he glanced at the lovely woman in the carriage. Even Clyde and Leon took a couple more glances at the black-haired beauty. "Guys, did you hear what I just said? If not, I'll repeat it. I want to go to the City of Steel. As a reward for escorting me, I'll give each of you a silver coin." At that moment, the carriage's door opened. Watson came down from the carriage with a wallet in his hand. Denise followed behind him. The impact on the adventurer team was much more significant when the two of them walked out. Denise's face was covered in scales resembling a snake. It was not a surprise as she was a former member of the Elven Kingdom and the Fire Elf race. Her eyes and hair were a flaming red, brimming with exotic hues. She was unlike Nightingale, yet equally gorgeous. The adventurer team was mesmerized by two distinct forms of beauty. Simultaneously, they were taken aback by the well-dressed youngster. He was able to enchant two magnificent ladies and an elf to accompany him. Clearly, that youth was not an ordinary person. You said that you are from the border. Where exactly did you come from? Furthermore, you're going to the City of Steel. Why would you want us to escort you? Clyde did not immediately agree with Watson's request. Instead, he cautiously inquired about that request. A silver coin per person was definitely enough to escort them to the City of Steel. It was not a small trade. His team members were only bronze tier. They would not earn a silver coin even if they hunted bronze tier magical beasts in the underground city every day. However, Watson had appeared and said that he wanted to hire him. Based on his adventurer's instincts, he felt that something was off. Since Watson wanted to trade, why did he not bring any guards with him? Furthermore, there was only one carriage, but none of them had any goods in it. He did not think that Watson looked like a merchant. It's simple. I was just passing by and saw that you escaped from the jaws of a silver tier monster. Your skills are not bad, so I wanted to hire you. If you are not willing, just pretend that I did not say anything. After Watson said that, he put the money pouch back into his pocket, turned around, and was about to leave. Wait a minute, who said that we're not taking that job? Captain Clyde, we entered the 11th floor rashly, and silver tier magical beasts have chased us for the whole day. So, we didn't even get any materials that we're supposed to get. If we don't take this job, we'll be in trouble for a long time. The young girl, Annie, tugged on Clyde's arm as he gave her a look. Yes, Captain, we're only escorting them to the City of Steel. There's no danger there, Arthur said, and even Leon nodded. Clyde's face changed when his team members urged him. After a long hesitation, he finally made up his mind. He said, very well, we'll take the job. 1 silver coin each. Pay half first, and pay the other half when we get there. Deal. Watson smiled. He took out 2 silver coins from his pouch and handed them to Clyde. Then, he looked around before he asked casually, oh, right. I heard that the City of Steel is also known as the City of Adventurers and that the adventurers are fond of the underground city. The magical beast that chased after you came from there, right? I'm a little interested in that ruin. I wonder if you can take me to explore it? Chapter 268. The Labyrinth's Metamorphosis. Watson's decision to hire Clyde and the others was quite straightforward. On the one hand, they were strangers who would very certainly face scrutiny if they entered the City of Steel. If they followed the city's residents, they would have a far lesser chance of being discovered. Plus, they could explore the underground city too. He could enter the underground city by himself, but he was not familiar with the terrain, so he might fall into a trap. He would have to use his strength to get out, and that would attract too much attention. It was better to familiarize himself with Clyde and the others first. Once he was confident enough, he would go there again by himself. When confronted with Watson's suggestion, the few adventurers there displayed apprehension. They had just recently emerged from the buried city. What would happen if they returned at that time and encountered that bunch of deadly magical animals once more? The adventurers looked hesitant when they heard Watson's request. They had just left the buried city. What would happen if they were to encounter that group of terrifying magical beasts again? Don't worry, I'll just go and take a look. I won't go too deep underground. As a reward for bringing me down there, I'll give you an additional gold coin as a reward. How about that? Watson took out a gold coin. The adventurers' eyes were a little dazed when they saw the gold coin that was equivalent to half a month of their regular income. Okay, I can take you. However, we can only go to the 10th level. We won't go anywhere beyond there. Furthermore, you have to listen to our instructions while we're there, said Clyde. He had wanted to refuse the job, but Watson had given him too much. Furthermore, it would not be too dangerous to get to the 10th floor. Thank you. I'm Watson. May I know your name? I'm Clyde. After they greeted each other, Watson ordered Denise to stay. He looked at the carriage and at Antonio, who had not gone down. He and Nightingale followed the adventurers to the underground city in the basin. The basin was not a large area, but it was still several times bigger than they had imagined. The crisscrossed stone sculptures were like a maze, and there were many deep gaps under the stone sculptures. They did not know where those gaps would lead to. It's a wise choice for you to choose the Blood Rose Adventurer team to be your guide. We are the best bronze tier team in the City of Steel. No one knows the buried city better than us. People said that its dungeon was a mysterious ruin from tens of thousands of years ago, but no one could investigate its history. The young girl, Annie, expressed with confidence as she walked next to Watson. Perhaps it was because she had received money, but her saliva was flying everywhere when she spoke. Is that so? That's really impressive. Watson smiled politely and stared at the ancient buildings in front of him. A piece of information automatically entered his eyes. Diamond Tier Special Ruin. The underground maze. The building itself was a product of the Loan civilization from 10,000 years ago. However, after it was occupied by underground people thousands of years ago, it had been completely transformed. Ability. There are 100 floors in the underground city. There are different monsters with varying strength levels on each floor. They get stronger the deeper you go. Furthermore, the monsters will respawn every once in a while. Additional abilities. Moving labyrinth. The labyrinth moves all the time. The structure of the labyrinth will change from time to time, including the number of levels. Monster territory. The monsters in the labyrinth can move freely between the levels and can leave the labyrinth, but they can't go too far away, and they will not move easily. Random treasure. There are treasure chests that appear from time to time in the buried city. Each will have different types of treasure. One can obtain the most remarkable treasure after clearing 100 levels. As he read the information, Watson knew that the building was only related to the ancient ruins from tens of thousands of years ago. The dungeon's mechanism caught his attention. There was a random treasure chest in it. The people who built the structures in the ruin must not have wanted outsiders to enter the buildings. They must have set up many traps to kill the intruders. However, the dungeons were different. It seemed like those adventurers were lured down there by the promise of treasure chests. While Watson was thinking, the two adventurers, Clyde and Leon, were exploring every ancient building while Arthur ran toward Nightingale to ingratiate himself with her. Beautiful lady, the dungeon is perilous. Look for me if you encounter any danger. I'll protect you. I'm the strongest person in the entire team, well, apart from the captain. I'm a bronze tier warrior, Arthur said as he fiddled with his pose. He showed off his muscles, which made Nightingale speechless. Nightingale was a platinum tier elite. When a mere bronze tier warrior flaunted his strength in front of her, she felt like she saw an ant boasting its power in front of an elephant. Unfortunately, Watson had told her to keep a low profile. She could only endure it. Arthur, don't act so silly in front of our guests. If you frighten them and they stop doing business with us, will you compensate us for the loss? Annie saw Nightingale's displeasure. She pulled Arthur's ear to take him away. If you have time, why don't you help the captain to study the entrances to find the best one for us to use? I've found a suitable place. Clyde stopped in front of a building and observed it for more than 10 minutes. As he crouched, he pointed at the empty space under his feet and said, "Young Master Watson, don't blame me for wasting time. The underground city's structure changes every once in a while. Even if we enter from the same entrance, we might end up in different places. Furthermore, some labyrinth sections are particularly dangerous, so we must identify the direction of those caves." Captain Clyde is a professional, indeed. Let's go down then. Watson nodded as he entered the cave with Clyde and the others. The cave extended downward diagonally, more than 10 meters deep. One would feel damp and cold as one entered it. Squeak. It was dark, but they could vaguely hear the sound of something crawling. Of course, the darkness was nothing to Watson because he had mastered a diamond tier spell called the Absolute Sight. It was enough for him to see things clearly in complete darkness. It also did not bother Nightingale, a platinum tier angel. On the other hand, the four adventurers could not see the environment in the passage clearly. Annie opened her right hand with a click, and a ball of flame appeared in her hand. Arthur, who was big and strong, took a short bow from his trouser leg before loading it with a few poisoned crossbow arrows. Clyde was a two-handed swordsman, Leon was a priest, and Arthur and Annie were an archer and a mage, respectively. They were well equipped. The monster creeping in front of them revealed its true form when illuminated by the flame in Annie's palm. It was a centipede as big as an arm, encased in an iron shell. It had dozens of feet, and vast swarms of centipedes were huddled together. The black iron shell reflected the faint light under the illumination of the flame. It's an iron tier magical beast, the iron armored centipede. Fortunately, it's not a particularly difficult magical beast. Clyde patted the armor on his chest and heaved a sigh of relief. The dungeon's terrain would change at any time, and the magical beasts they would encounter were also different. The magical beasts on the same floor would have different strengths and weaknesses. The giant flaming lizard they had encountered on the 11th floor was a particularly powerful one. Except for Arthur, everyone on the team was relieved because they knew that they would make a lot of money that day. Only Arthur was sad that he could not show off in front of Nightingale. Young Master Watson, the iron-armored centipede is pretty easy to kill. Its shell can be used to make iron-tier tools, and its venom glands can be used to make poison. In short, those magical beasts have many valuable parts. As he explained to Watson, Clyde went to the group of centipedes with his two-handed sword in his hand. He slashed most of the centipedes in half with a single swipe of his blade. With practiced movements, he removed the hard shell on the back of the centipedes and the poison glands as well. The others followed suit and quickly collected more than 100 iron-armored centipedes. The other centipedes had disappeared, and the entire passage was clear. Young Master Watson, there's nothing to see on this floor. Let's go to the next floor. Oh, right, I almost forgot to mention that sometimes we'd find treasure chests and medicinal herbs on the walls. However, it doesn't look like we're lucky this round. Clyde was a little disappointed, but he continued to lead Watson downward. He was a frugal person, so he did not forget to collect the materials as he introduced them to Watson. Soon, Clyde led Watson down to the dungeon's 10th floor. Along the way, they passed through many more iron-armored centipedes, bloodthirsty bats, two-headed pythons, and other monsters. However, they managed to kill all of them. Every dungeon level had an obvious fault, which was similar to the holes on the outside. Each hole was more than 10 meters deep. The 10th floor was already more than 100 meters underground. At that moment, the dungeon had gotten darker, but its surroundings were not completely silent. Instead, they heard people. A few sparks of fire appeared in the tunnel that was wider than the one above. A few adventurer teams in iron-tier armor and longswords were fighting a 3-meter-tall minotaur with a giant axe in its hand. There were 3 minotaurs, and the 3 teams were dealing with one each. It's a peak bronze tier magical beast, a minotaur warrior. This is a rare magical beast. The minotaur warrior's axes were polished by themselves. In terms of strength, they are not weaker than a peak bronze tier weapon. The 2 horns on their heads are great materials for forging weapons, and their flesh and blood are high-quality medicinal ingredients. Their bodies are full of treasures. Clyde's eyes lit up when he saw those beasts, but they dimmed as quickly as well. What a pity. All the magical beasts on this floor have been taken. Young Master Watson, let's go back. Watson looked around him and nodded. Along the way, he had a preliminary understanding of the underground maze. The monsters on each floor were different, and they were stronger the further down they went. The number of monsters might decrease, and each floor had a passage that led to the next floor. It was very convenient to find them. Watson resolved to explore the next floor on his own. Then, he returned with Nightingale and Clyde. Alas, the magical beasts we encountered were either very weak or had been stolen by someone else. Why aren't there any more powerful magical beasts or a mutated labyrinth? Arthur was carrying a large bag full of materials from the magical beasts they slew. He strolled back to the entrance as he glanced at the graceful Nightingale from time to time and muttered unwillingly. Annie sneered at him. Arthur, what are you saying, you coward? Wouldn't you be the first to run away if we do encounter a powerful magical beast or a mutated labyrinth? As soon as she finished speaking, a loud boom echoed from the tunnel before the entire tunnel shook violently. Chapter 269. The Gold-Tier Evil-Eyed Monster. What happened? Annie scanned the area in fear. She noticed that the entire passageway was shaking, and cracks had appeared on the ground and the surrounding walls. Behind her, the adventurer teams fighting the Minotaur warriors had lost their combat strength and fell to the ground after the violent quake. At the same time, the cracks in the ground widened. Some of the adventurer teams, along with the Minotaur warriors, fell into the void and disappeared. The entire 10-story underground area seemed to be collapsing, sinking deeper into hell. Is the labyrinth changing? DMN it. Arthur, you jinx. I told you not to spout nonsense. Now, the labyrinth's metamorphosis has really happened. Annie's expression changed from panic to fear. The labyrinth's metamorphosis referred to the process of the free transformation of a certain level in the labyrinth when it suddenly connected with another labyrinth on the same level or a labyrinth that did not belong to that level. The metamorphosis represented an opportunity to enter a deeper level quickly. It also represented danger. An unexplored level of the maze might have even more terrifying magical beasts. Run. The passage is not far from where we are. Let's try our best to get up there. Clyde was the calmest in the group. He stood guard in front of Watson and Nightingale, shattering the falling rocks above their heads. Arthur did not dare to say anything else at that time. He shut his mouth and rushed toward the passage with his head lowered. Meanwhile, Leon chanted a mysterious prayer to draw an invisible force from the sky to descend onto everyone there. Thank you, God, for your mercy. Bless everyone with speed. That was a blessing that could significantly increase everyone's speed. Watson had it as well. He seemed weird as he felt the blessing's power. The power of faith that the priest had mastered is indeed magical. It can increase the speed of a platinum-tier elite like me by 1/3. If it were a bronze-tier spell, the effect on his speed would be minimal. That was because he had mastered the absolute magic immunity spell. It was not only low-tier spells, but high-tier spells would not affect him as well. However, a blessing could do what those spells could not, so he was curious about the priest's ability. The difference between a blessing and a spell was not only that. The release of a spell was an instantaneous process. Whether it was an attack or a defensive spell, they were formed in an instant. A blessing was different. It had a continuous process, and it could be delivered onto oneself and others, as well. If they had known Watson was contemplating those things as he fled, the adventurers would almost certainly have collapsed. We're close to the tunnel. Everyone, put in more effort. Clyde dashed to the tunnel's entrance. He noticed that the tunnel opening was closing in on him. 100 meters, 50 meters, 10 meters. Clyde's eyes glowed with energy as he realized the tunnel was only inches away. At that very moment, something on the ground broke with a dull sound. Then, his eyesight dimmed as his body descended into an infinite state of weightlessness. No, the hole over his head grew smaller until it vanished entirely. That was Clyde's final sentence. After an unknown amount of time, 2 people climbed out of the tunnel's remains. Young Master Watson, aren't you going to help those people? The 2 people who managed to climb out were Nightingale and Watson. No, we will be exposed if we make a move now. Additionally, the tunnel only collapsed a few meters or a few floors. That is nothing to a bronze-tier warrior. It just so happens that I am interested in learning more about the underground city. I believe that there will be something different in its deeper levels. Watson pulled the expensive robe he was wearing and rubbed it repeatedly against the ground and the wall. Soon, it was covered in dust. Nightingale gave him a concerned glance when she saw that. Finally, she stretched out to grab the wall and touched her face twice, pretending to be in a sorry state. She lacked Watson's outrageousness. Ahem, ahem, ahem. The sound of coughing came from the remnants of a rock. Clyde clambered out of the ruins behind Watson and Nightingale. He was limping with 2 swords in his hands. He was taken aback when he noticed Watson and Nightingale were in front of him. How did you 2 survive such a violent fall? We were fortunate. We landed in an area without any falling debris, Watson remarked, clutching his back and appearing to grimace in pain. However, I hurt my back in the fall. My bones feel as if they are fractured. He noticed that Watson and Nightingale were both covered in dust and looked quite miserable. Clyde began calling out to his companions without hesitation. Are you all right, Annie? Arthur? Leon? Clyde used his 2-handed sword to brush away the debris on the ground while he called out to his friends. He quickly located his 3 teammates among a pile of rocks. Except for Arthur, who was struck in the head and had his face covered in blood, Annie and Leon sustained only minor injuries. Arthur, you scumbag, I despise you. Without your jinx, how would we have discovered the labyrinth's metamorphosis? We have no idea how many floors there are in the labyrinth. If the number of floors is excessive, then we may not even make it back alive. Annie complained loudly to Arthur after she climbed out. Arthur, who had been reprimanded, said nothing. He simply curled up in a corner and tore a part of his clothing discreetly to bandage his head. Clyde, unable to tolerate another fight, walked up to mediate the situation. All right, you guys don't have to worry too much. Perhaps this place is close to the 10th floor, and it's only the 11th floor? We had just exited the 11th floor. At worst, we can simply repeat it. Additionally, the magical beasts here may not be as frightening as the flame lizard we had just encountered. Watson curled his lips and remained silent in response to Clyde's consolation. In his opinion, they were on either the 14th or 15th floor. As if to confirm his words, a terrible roar erupted from a distance in the dark passage, followed by the shouts from several adventurer teams that had fallen in earlier. Monster! Monster! There is a monster here! We can't go back, we are finished! Someone save me! Those shouts were mixed with the screams and sounds of fighting. Everyone, including Clyde, shuddered when they heard those shouts. Even Watson and Nightingale frowned. A fireball appeared in Annie's palm. It illuminated the front. Soon, the adventurer teams that were screaming earlier revealed themselves from the depths of the tunnel. There had been more than a dozen people when they fought the Minotaur warriors. Only 6 of them were left. 2 of them had lost their arms as they rolled and crawled out of the tunnel. More than 10 Minotaur warriors with metal axes in their hands were behind those adventurers. Thick and white air currents shot out from the beast's nostrils. It looks like the Minotaur warriors had managed to injure those adventurers. Clyde exhaled a breath of relief when he saw the magical beasts emerge from the tunnel. Those monsters remained constant, indicating that their numbers had not fallen significantly. He surmised that the adventurers and Minotaur warriors had perished together. The Minotaur warriors had thick skin and were the first to wake up, which was why they had suffered such heavy losses. Of course, even though the Minotaur warriors were bronze-tier magical beasts, fighting one would require numerous warriors of the same level. However, he had been worried because he did not know where they were. It seemed like his odds of survival had improved. As Clyde considered that, one of the Minotaur warriors on its way toward their location was suddenly snatched by an invisible hand. There was a sound before the enormous head had vanished. Then, they heard something chewing in midair. What is that? Clyde's face stiffened, and he paled. He stared blankly at the tunnel in the air. With the help of the flames in Annie's hand, he could vaguely see eyes that did not have the white part above the tunnel. Then, he noticed the mouths with sharp teeth. They rubbed against one another as though poised to eat someone. In Clyde's memory, there was only one type of magical beast with many eyes. That was something he had overheard while drinking with another powerful adventurer in the City of Steel. The mighty explorer said that he saw a scary and repulsive magical beast while he explored the underground city. Its entire body was covered in eyes, and he had dubbed the magical beast the evil-eyed monster, and it was gold tier. Private Bin. Parce que l'ignorance c'est le bonheur. 1.3.2. Private Bin est un pastebin. Ou gestionnaire d'extraits de texte et de code source. Minimalist et open source. Dans lequel le serve. Chapter 270. Watson makes his move. Gold tier magical beast. Evil-eyed monster. Attributes. Water, darkness. Abilities. Void chains. Can trap one or more enemies and transfers the damage received to the enemy. Spirit Whip. Evil Eye casts dark magic to deal soul damage to the enemy. Locked Arc Lightning. Deals large-scale lightning damage that cannot be avoided. Disintegration Rays. Casts dark magic to disintegrate all matter and deal gold tier damage. Small Black Holes. Creates small black holes that absorb all attacks and deal gold tier damage. Additional attributes. High tier magic immunity. High tier physical immunity. Regeneration. The body can heal even if it's cut off. Parasitic. It can parasitize other creatures and control the host. Watson stared ahead as the monster's attributes appeared in his eyes. That monster's abilities are quite strong. It's considered one of the best, even among gold tier beasts. It's not inferior to the gold tier chimera that I've created before. But it looks too disgusting. I don't like it. He entered the underground city because he wanted to see what was in its deepest parts. On the other hand, he also wanted to see if there were any suitable magical beasts there. He wanted to capture them and let the sky-devouring Rat King devour them. Then, he could enrich the variety of magical beasts on the mountain. At that moment, the only magical beasts on the mountain were the Golden Flash, Emperor Cluck, and the sky-devouring Rat King. The selection was a little too sparse. After all, the City of Steel was not located on the border. Since he could not fuse with the underground city, he was forced to use that method. Of course, he was not considering the large-eyed monster in front of him. While he was thinking, the evil-eyed monster in the tunnel launched another attack. Large eyes began to fall, one after the other. A thin layer of black eyelids covered the eyes, and the backs of the eyes were connected via a tiny nerve. The nerve wound danced through the air, wrapping around the neck of an adventurer team member who was attempting to flee. The slick sensation caused the adventurer team member to scream, but he soon lost his ability to do that too. Blood streamed down his body as a result of the long, thin nerve twisted around his neck. The adventurer team member was hanging in the air. The death of an adventurer team member made the others, who were trying to escape, even crazier. Unfortunately, even if they used all their limbs, they were not as fast as the evil-eyed monsters. An eyeball fell on the head of another adventurer team member. However, the evil-eyed monster did not strangle him to death. Instead, it used the huge mouth that grew around the eyeball to bite the adventurer's head off. Additionally, the black-gray eye was shooting streaks of pitch-black light as it flew through the air. It was a gold-tier dark attribute spell, disintegrating light. Everything that came into contact with the light, whether rocks or human bodies, would disintegrate into minute fragments. A blindingly bright light struck another adventurer, and fissures developed throughout his body. He strained to extend his right hand, but his body broke into dust before he could even cry out in fear. 4 of the 6 adventurers were immediately slaughtered, leaving only 2 bloodied survivors. They struggled to crawl ahead of Clyde and the others. They cried out for help. "Save us, Pa." Without waiting for Clyde's response, Arthur, who had been hiding behind them, rushed forward and kicked his teammates' hands away. "What are you doing, Arthur?" Clyde regained his composure and screamed aggressively. "Captain, those 2 people are seriously injured. Even if we get them out, they might not survive it. Why don't we leave them here and use them as bait? We still have a chance to escape." Arthur swallowed his saliva, turning his head away from the 2 desperate adventurers in front of him. The reluctance in his eyes quickly turned into determination. At the same time, he turned around to look at Watson and Nightingale. "It's not only them. We also have these 2 foreigners who paid us to enter the dungeon. If they did not insist on entering the dungeon, we wouldn't have encountered the labyrinth's metamorphosis. I suggest we keep them here as well." His idea was very simple. The more people they could use as bait, the greater their chances of survival. "Using us as bait? Is that what you all think?" Watson looked amused and stopped Nightingale, who was about to say something. Even though Nightingale did not say anything, she saw that Arthur's expression got colder. It was as if she was looking at a dead person. The magical beast in front of her was only gold tier. She did not even need young Master Watson to deal with it. She was not angry when the magical beasts had killed other people because she was an emotionless killer. However, she was mad with Arthur's attitude. She had wanted to save that group of people, but she had changed her mind. "Arthur, I'm really disappointed in you." Clyde shook his head at Arthur. He raised the 2 longswords in his hands and blocked Watson. As an adventurer, the most important thing is credibility. If you betray your employer for profit, what's the difference between that and selling your soul? If you want to escape, then run. I'll stay here and fight until the last moment. Those were Clyde's words. There was something he did not say. Where could he run? The evil eye monster's coverage encompassed the entire section. It was better to fight the monster. Their chances of survival were higher. "I support the captain's decision, Arthur. You were the one who said that it would be great if there were a change in the maze. Now that there is a change in the labyrinth, you're blaming others instead. Are you a man?" Annie also stood beside Clyde. She raised her palm. The flame that had been used for illumination had turned into the size of a human head. Bursts of orange sparks burst from it. It looked very lethal. Leon did not say anything. He dragged 2 injured adventurers to the side and began to pray to cast God's blessing to alleviate their pain. The 2 adventurers' expressions got a little calmer as they recovered from their fear and sadness. They expressed their gratitude loudly. "We are members of the Holy Sword Adventurer team in the City of Steel. Our leader is the kingdom's most famous swordswoman. If we make it out of here alive, we will report this to the swordswoman and express our gratitude to both of you. Then we will have to wait until we get out of here alive." Clyde roared angrily and suddenly took a step forward. The 2 swords in his hands drew a cross-shaped sword light. Bronze tier battle technique, cross-square cut. The cross-shaped sword light was covered with a thick layer of wind attribute combat aura. It had turned into a powerful whirlwind and swept past the passage more than 10 meters in front of him. That move shattered the rocks on the ground. Bronze tier spell, explosive flame. Annie quickly followed suit with her own strike. A fireball the size of a human head fused with the sword light in the cross shape to create a layer of flames for the whistling whirlwind. The flame whirlwind shone brightly as it lit up the entire cave. Leon did not sit idle either. He cast the blessing of God to make the attacks of Clyde and Arthur stronger. DMN it. Arthur cursed before he joined the fight. The crossbow in his hand shot out like lightning. The eyeball of the evil-eyed monster, which was gathering toward Clyde and was about to cast a spell, was forced to shrink back. The evil-eyed monster's eyeball, advancing toward Clyde and about to cast a spell, was forced to retract. The four of them launched coordinated attacks. While there were only 4 bronze tier attacks, they were no weaker than a silver tier warrior's full strength attack when combined. However, such an attack would have been futile in the face of the evil-eyed creature. The attacks of the 4 of them were smooth and coordinated. Although there were only 4 bronze tier attacks, when combined, they were not weaker than the full strength attack of a silver tier warrior. However, such an attack was useless in front of the evil-eyed monster. The evil-eyed monster's dark gray eyeball glowed with purple light. 4 purple chains flew out and landed like lightning on Clyde and his other 3 members. A flaming tornado swept past the evil-eyed monster's body. The evil-eyed monster remained unharmed. On the contrary, it was the 4 of them. Their bodies seemed to have been set ablaze for a long time. They were charred black and flew backward. DMN it. Are we going to die here today? Clyde's mouth erupted with green smoke as he laid weakly on the ground. His eyes were brimming with despair. Even someone as courageous as him felt sad. Their united strike collided with the evil-eyed monster's body and was deflected. They failed to inflict even a single wound. They had no idea how they would fight that battle. It was not just him. Arthur, Annie, Leon, and even the 2 adventurers trembling on the side were ashen. Only the smooth sound of the evil eye monster's eyeballs moving could be heard throughout the corridor, bringing the shadow of doom to everyone. Sigh. I had not wanted to make a move. A tender voice resounded across the tunnel just as everyone thought they were dead. Then, they witnessed the teenager, who had hired them, take a weak step forward and said 3 words to the evil-eyed monster ensconced on the wall. Get down now. The next scene shocked them. The evil-eyed monster that could completely crush them trembled and let out a terrified scream. Its body continued to shrink until it became a head-sized human eyeball with tentacles around it. It landed in front of Watson. Then, Watson stepped forward and crushed the eyeball.